Chapter 952. The establishment of the new sect was in full swing. As the saying goes, many hands pick up firewood, the flame grows taller. With the joint efforts of countless people, the construction of the new sect progressed very quickly. Of course, the most important thing was Xiao Sheng and the other three patriarchs. It was not a simple task for them to build the new small world where the new sect would be located. Fortunately, as the new sect had just been established, they only needed to figure out the general structure first. As for the rest, it would not be a problem to slowly expand in the future. In order to save time, Xiao Sheng and the other three patriarchs naturally could not build the new small world in one go. They only built a part of it first. Then, many warriors from the Tiana continent and the Tianshan continent entered the small world and began to build palaces and houses. It was obviously impossible to build the entire small world in one go. Therefore, Xiao Sheng and the other three patriarchs cleverly chose to proceed in stages. First, they completed a part of it. After the new sect was established, they would gradually complete the other projects. In the newly constructed small world, hundreds of thousands of future disciples and elders of the new sect were working together to build everything for the new sect. Magnificent buildings rose from the ground in this new small world. At the same time, Xiao Sheng and the other three patriarchs, as well as the saints, used their great magic to move some of the beautiful mountains and rivers from the outside world into this small world. For example, the 9 peaks of the former 9 Cloud Palace, as well as some of the cultivation's secret realms where the 7 overlords once resided, were all moved into this small world. Even Tiangong Mountain was moved in as a decoration in this small world. The originally barren small world, with the efforts of everyone, was soon overflowing with vitality and picturesque scenery. It had become an existence similar to an immortal realm. Only a few months had passed. When they entered this small world, they were surrounded by clouds and mist. There were countless strange mountains, strange rocks, and lakes. At the same time, in the center of this small world, there were dozens of mountains that were suspended in the air using the power of talisman formations. These mountain peaks floated in the sky, as if they were the residences of immortals. At the same time, on these mountain peaks, there were lush green trees, birds chirping, and flowers fragrant. Many elegant and simple buildings stood in an intricate manner. These floating mountains were where the new sect was located. In the future, all the disciples and elders of the new sect would live and cultivate on these mountains. From afar, the dozens of mountains looked disorderly, but in fact, they were extremely orderly. The outermost mountains were obviously much smaller, and in the middle, the largest mountain was obviously the center. Around the central mountain, there were a total of 10 slightly smaller mountains floating around, as if they were guarding the central mountain. After a total of half a year, the new sect was finally established. Although there was still a long way to go before it was fully established, it was already enough to meet the requirements for the establishment of the new sect. As for the remaining matters, after the new sect was established, they could slowly perfect it. The initial rewards for the new sect were completed. At the same time, on the dozens of floating mountains, many warriors from the Tiana continent and the Tianshan continent moved in. From now on, this would be their home. It was time to start the establishment of the new sect. Now, almost all of the 7 overlords of the Tianshan continent had been moved into this small world. As for the secret realms of the ancient sacred sect and the 3 sacred sects in the Tiana continent, Xiao Sheng and the others would move all of them into this small world. There was no need for them to worry about this. On this day, on the central mountain, in a magnificent hall, all the saints, as well as Xiao Sheng and the other 3 great ancestors, gathered together and sat on the main seats. Xiao Sheng and the others looked at the saints below. Although not all the saints were present, there were still more than 30 saints gathered in this hall. After glancing at the crowd, Xiao Sheng said slowly, "Everyone, the establishment of the new sect is imminent. With everyone's efforts, the construction of a new sect has been preliminarily completed. We also plan to announce the establishment of the new sect to the public and hold a ceremony for the establishment of the new sect. The first stage of construction had been completed, so it was indeed time to announce the establishment of the new sect. Hearing Xiao Sheng's words, all the saints present nodded with a faint smile on their faces. The establishment of the new sect was expected by everyone, and they had been looking forward to this for a long time by Xiao Sheng. Now, after everyone's efforts, it was finally time for the establishment of the new sect. How could they not be happy? However, just as Xiao Sheng's voice fell, Saint Qing Ju, who had rushed over from the Tiana continent, smiled and said with a slightly excited tone, "Great Ancestor, our new sect hasn't been named yet, right? There has to be a name, right?" All the work for the establishment of the new sect had been completed, but the most important thing was the name. Sure enough, after hearing Saint Qing Ju's words, all the saints' eyes fell on Xiao Sheng and the other three great ancestors. When it came to naming the new sect, the only people qualified to do so were naturally Xiao Sheng and the other three great ancestors. Now that the four of them had broken through to the quasi-saint realm, it was no exaggeration to say that Xiao Sheng and the others were the four pillars of the new sect. As long as they were still around, the new sect would not fall. Randang Cozy Eye, who had long thought of this problem, chuckled softly as he faced the gazes of all the saints. Naturally, we already have a name. This new sect will be called the Sacred Palace. Sacred Palace. Hearing this name, all the saints were slightly taken aback, as if they were muttering these two words. Sacred Palace. At first glance, these two words sounded very simple, but revealed everyone's expectations for the new sect. How confident was it to directly use the word saint? Compared to the previous ancient sacred sect, heavenly sacred sect, and sun sacred sect, the two words Sacred Palace were undoubtedly much simpler, but at the same time, much more domineering. Sacred Palace was the name Xiao Sheng and the other three great ancestors had chosen for the new sect. At the same time, the small world where the Sacred Palace was located would be called the Sacred World in the future. After a moment of silence, all the saints gladly accepted the name Sacred Palace. It was simple but domineering. This was the name that the new sect needed. Now that the name had been decided, the next step was to announce to the world that the Sacred Palace had been established. At the same time, because of the initial establishment of the Sacred Palace, the entire Sacred Palace system had naturally undergone some adjustments. Although it was similar to the previous ancient sacred sect and heavenly sacred sect, there are many differences in many aspects. Please collect, please vote, please recommend. End of chapter. Chapter 9:53. With the establishment of the Sacred Palace imminent, Xiao Chun, Qin Shu, and the others had all arrived at the sacred region. Xiao Chun had been staying in Ridge Mountain City for half a year. Now that the sacred region had been established as the future first holy son of the Sacred Palace, Xiao Chun naturally had to participate in the Sacred Palace's founding ceremony. Of course, Xiao Chun was accompanied by Xiao Qing, by Riyue, Qin Yao, Qing Luo, Fei Mei, and the others. It was their first time stepping into the sacred region. With just a glance, Qin Yao, Qing Luo, and the others were completely captivated by the magnificent scenery. Needless to say, the spiritual energy in the sacred region was at least 10 times more abundant than in the outside world. What truly shocked Qin Yao, Qing Luo, and the others was the fairyland-like scenery in the sacred region. Clouds and mist drifted in and out of the shade of the trees. Qin Yao, Qing Luo, and the others couldn't help but exclaim, "What a beautiful place! Is this the small world where the new sect is located? It's so big. It can actually carve out such a huge, small world," the girls exclaimed. In fact, they weren't the only ones. Even Xiao Chun was a little shocked by the sacred region in front of them. It wasn't hard to imagine that Xiao Sheng, the four patriarchs, and the saints had probably put in a lot of effort to build the sacred region. Putting everything else aside, just creating the small world where the sacred region was located wasn't a simple task. Anyway, according to Xiao Chen's understanding, a saint definitely couldn't do it. Only a quasi-saint had the ability to do so. It was an immortal-like existence, and this was where Xiao Chun and the others would live and cultivate in the future. accompanying Shaoqing and Bai Ruyue. The group soon arrived at the sacred palace and the mountain peaks floating in the sky. He did not allow Shaoqing and Bai Ruyue to stay in Lingshan Prefecture City. Instead, he chose to bring them to the sacred palace. Firstly, the cultivation environment in the sacred palace was clearly 100 times better than that of the Shao residence. Even if the two elders did not do anything here, they would at least be able to extend their lives. After all, there was such rich spiritual energy here. Secondly, the two elders were worried about Shao Chun. Although Shao Chun had completely grown up, Shao Chun was still a child in their eyes. Moreover, the two elders did not want to be separated from their son, so they followed Shao Chun to the sacred palace. Naturally, no one said anything about the arrival of the two elders. With Shao Chun's status, it was normal for him to bring his parents to live in the sacred palace. Just like the saints, they would also bring their families to live in the sacred region. Because the sacred palace was still in its initial stages, there were many things that had yet to be sorted out. However, Shao Chen's cave dwelling had already been completed, so he could bring everyone to move in. After settling down in the sacred palace, Qin Yao, Qin Luo, and Qin Shu began to decorate the cave dwelling as soon as they entered. This was where everyone would live in the future, so there were many things that needed to be personally arranged by everyone. Shao Chun had no interest in this, so he strolled around the cave, dwelling with nothing to do. Around dusk, Chun Ling and Long Qing came to visit. The two of them had also just arrived in the sacred region. The three of them naturally had to have a drink together. Moreover, according to what Shao Chun knew, Chun Ling and Long Qing would become chosen of the sacred palace in the future. This was something that Shao Sheng and the other ancestors had already thought about. With Chun Ling and Long Qing's strength, it would not be very difficult for them to become chosen. Not to mention, the two of them had broken through to the Dao Emperor realm just like Shao Chun, so Shao Chun was a little surprised. One of them was the reincarnation of a great expert, while the other was a pure-blooded dragon. Their cultivation speed was truly shocking. However, compared to the two of them, Shao Chun was probably even more shocking. After all, Shao Chun was just an ordinary human. He did not have any memories of his past life, nor was he a pure-blooded dragon. However, after so many years, Shao Chun's cultivation had not been pulled apart by Chun Ling and Long Qing, and he was still closely behind them. The three siblings reunited and drank until late at night. In the end, Chun Ling and Long Qing directly stayed in Shao Chun's cave dwelling. Following the completion of the sacred region, more and more people surged into the sacred region in the following month. These people were basically the disciples and attendants of the three sacred sects of the Tian'an continent. Of course, some of the disciples of the 7 overlords of the Tian'an continent were also able to live in the sacred region. They could be considered as the first batch of disciples of the sacred palace. Because the sacred palace already had a strong foundation, the number of people in the sacred palace had already reached a terrifying 200,000 when it had just been completed. 200,000 disciples were only left after the saints had carefully selected and eliminated many people who did not have enough talent. If they had not been selected, the number of people would have probably exceeded 1 million. It was also because of this strict selection that those who were fortunate enough to become the first batch of official disciples of the sacred palace were not weak. They were even much stronger than the ancient sacred sects of the past. These 200,000 people were the first batch of official disciples of the sacred palace. As for the 800,000 people who were eliminated, after another round of selection, 400,000 people stayed and became unofficial disciples of the sacred palace. As for the remaining 400,000, those who did not pass the 2 rounds of selection could only choose to join the outer palace of the sacred palace, which was the small sects and clans of the Tian'an continent and the Tian'an continent. But now, with the establishment of the sacred palace, these clans and sects have been collectively referred to as the outer palace of the sacred palace. Throughout the Tian'an continent and the Tian'an continent, after continuous adjustments and optimizations, the sacred palace had a total of 99 outer palaces. The number could be said to be quite large. Moreover, the number of disciples in the outer palace had reached millions. It was simply embarrassing. However, although there were many Outer Palace disciples, their treatment was obviously not as good as the official disciples of the Sacred Palace. Even the unofficial disciples were far inferior. The reason was very simple. The Outer Palace disciples were not qualified to enter the sacred region at all. While sorting out the first batch of disciples of the Sacred Palace, the saints were also planning the establishment of the Sacred Palace at the same time. 3 months later, on this day, the Sacred Palace was officially established. Everyone in the Tianqian continent and the Tiana continent congratulated it together. A colossal existence had truly appeared in front of everyone. The world saw the day of the Sacred Palace's establishment. That scene was probably unforgettable for the rest of their lives. There were 4 quasi-saints, a total of 46 saints, and a total of 10 saints' sons and saintesses. Below them, there were even more quasi-saints, quasi-saintesses, and half-saints. There were so many that people couldn't even remember them. With such strength, the Sacred Palace was worthy of being the overlord of the 2 continents. All the warriors and forces on the Tianqian continent and the Tiana continent bowed their heads. Please collect, please vote, please recommend. This chapter ends. Chapter 954. It was no exaggeration to say that the establishment of the Sacred Palace represented the arrival of a new era. All the forces of the Tianqian continent and the Tiana continent were vassals of the Sacred Palace and had become its external palaces. For the first time, the sect masters of the various external palaces were fortunate enough to enter the sacred region. Guests and experts gathered on the central peak. The huge main peak was bustling with wine, music, and dancing. Xiao Shang's 4 Sacred Palace ancestors, the 9 Heaven Saint and other Sacred Palace saints, as well as Xiao Chun and other Sacred Palace chosen and saintesses were all present. Everyone drank and chatted, their hearts filled with hope for the future of the Sacred Palace. In truth, Xiao Chan was already very familiar with such banquets and celebrations. However, the scale of the Sacred Palace's founding ceremony this time was much larger than any of the banquets and celebrations that Xiao Chan had attended before. Almost all the famous people on the Tiana continent and the Tianqian continent were present. Even Chu Wuming had rushed over from the Tiana continent to participate in the Sacred Palace's founding ceremony. When the banquet was halfway through, ancient sage Randang, who was sitting on the main seat, suddenly said with a chuckle, "You're right. Everyone, in addition to announcing the establishment of the Sacred Palace, today's Sacred Palace ceremony also has an important announcement to make." As soon as Randang Cozy Eyes spoke, the crowd quickly quieted down. Although Randang Cozy Eyes' voice was very calm and gave off a refreshing feeling, no one dared to be presumptuous in front of him. This was because everyone present knew that Randang Cozy Eye and the other 3 were genuine quasi-saints and could be said to be legendary figures. Now that Randang Cozy Eye said that there was something else to announce, the crowd quieted down. Under the attention of the crowd, Randang Cozy Eye did not keep them in suspense and slowly spoke. As everyone knows, there are a total of 10 Sacred Palace chosen and saintesses. Today, taking advantage of a Sacred Palace ceremony, the Sacred Palace will hold the first Sacred Palace chosen battle to determine the ranking of the 10 Sacred Palace chosen and saintesses. The chosen battle of the Sacred Palace. Upon hearing Randang Cozy Eye's words, everyone present could no longer remain calm and couldn't help but grow excited. To be able to witness a battle between the chosen of the Sacred Palace was definitely a dream come true for everyone. One must know that the 10 chosen of the Sacred Palace had emerged from bloody battles with the demon race. They were genuine young kings who had crawled out from mountains of corpses and seas of blood. The holy sons and holy daughters of the Heavenly Saints sect, the Ancient Saints sect, and the Yangxing sect had all died because of the 8 years of fierce battle with the Devil Clan. Now, only 7 of them were left. Together with the 3 siblings, Xiao Chun, Chun Ling, and Long Qing, they formed the 10 holy sons and holy daughters of the Divine Palace. No one present could remain calm after witnessing the battle between the 10 chosens and chosens of the Sacred Palace with their own eyes. Seeing that everyone's emotions had been completely stirred up, Randang Cozy Eye smiled faintly and raised his hand to signal for everyone to calm down. He then said, "Everyone, please calm down for a moment. Before the chosen battle begins, this old man still has something to say. The chosen battle will determine the ranking of the 10 chosens of the Sacred Palace. However, before it begins, the 4 of us have decided together that the first chosen of the Sacred Palace will not be determined through a competition. Instead, the position will be directly held by Xiao Chun. The chosen battle of the Sacred Palace was indeed going to be held, but the position of the first chosen had already been reserved. That person was Xiao Chun." Following Randang Cozy Eye's words, countless eyes instantly focused on Xiao Chun. It was no exaggeration to say that if he became the first chosen of the Sacred Palace, Xiao Chun could be described as having monstrous power in the future. His status would most likely surpass those of the saints. In the face of everyone's gazes, Xiao Chun appeared very calm. After all, he already knew about this matter, so at this moment, there was nothing to be shocked about. However, compared to Xiao Chen's calmness, the other chosens and saintesses all had different expressions. Chen Yu, Emperor Qing, Hu Fei, and Jiang Yu did not have any special thoughts other than being a little surprised. However, the remaining 3 chosens and saintesses from the Sky Saint sect and Sun Saint sect appeared very jealous. The 3 of them were naturally dissatisfied that Xiao Chun had become the first son of the Sacred Palace without going through the competition. In their opinion, Xiao Chen's strength was not enough to become the first son of the Sacred Palace. Sure enough, a woman with an icy temperament soon stood up and looked directly at Randang Cozy Eye and the others on the main seats. "Ancestor, since the ranking of the Sacred Palace chosens is determined through a competition, why is the position of the first chosen directly decided?" This disciple is not convinced. This woman was called Yun Chuan, and she came from the Sun Saint sect. She was once the second saintess of the Sun Saint sect. Randang Cozy Eye and the others had clearly expected this when they heard Yun Chuan's words. They did not answer and only looked at Xiao Chun. Their meaning was very clear. They should solve their own problems by themselves. Xiao Chen's position as the first chosen would definitely arouse the displeasure of the other chosens and saintesses. It was precisely because of this that Xiao Sheng and the others helped Xiao Chun cleanse his marrow and break through to the Tao Emperor realm. At this moment, Xiao Chen stood up helplessly when he saw the gazes of Xiao Sheng and the others. He smiled at Yin Chuan and said, "Senior Sister Yin Chuan, why don't we spar?" If he wanted everyone to acknowledge his position as the first chosen, the simplest way was to rely on strength. So, Xiao Chen did not waste his breath and directly challenged Yin Chuan. "If you're not convinced, then let's fight." Sure enough, Yin Chuan did not even give it a second thought when she heard Xiao Chen's words. "All right, if I lose, I'll acknowledge your position as the first chosen. However, junior brother Xiao Chun, if you lose, it means that you don't have the qualifications to become the first chosen of the Sacred Palace. You don't have any objections to this, right?" Of course. Xiao Chen nodded when he heard Yin Chuan's words. The 2 of them agreed to battle. Afterwards, Xiao Chun and Yin Chuan arrived at the spacious field at the center of the banquet and stood still. The Sacred Palace had already made preparations for this chosen battle, so they had specially set aside an empty space at the center of the banquet. Moreover, they had even specially inscribed a formation to isolate the aftershocks of the chosen battle. They stood still at the center of the field that had been prepared beforehand. At the same time, the formation activated, and an invisible screen of light quickly enveloped Xiao Chun and Yun Chuan. The entire process of the battle could be clearly seen from the outside world. However, the aftershocks of the battle were unable to penetrate the formation at all, so they would not disturb the banquet. No one had expected that a chosen would battle so soon. Everyone present held their breaths in concentration as they looked at the 2 who stood 5 meters apart from each other. They were filled with excitement as they anticipated the start of the battle. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. This chapter ends. Chapter 955. The first chosen battle had begun so soon, and it was being fought by Xiao Chun, who had already been selected as the first chosen. So it could be said that countless people were paying attention to this battle. After all, as the first chosen, Xiao Chun was the leader of the 10 great chosen of the Sacred Palace, and his strength represented the top combat strength of the Sacred Palace's younger generation. To a large extent, one could infer the overall strength of the Sacred Palace's younger generation just by looking at Xiao Chen's combat strength. After all, if even the so-called First Chosen's combat strength was mediocre, then the strength of the Chosen and even ordinary disciples below him was obvious. If a sheep led a pack of wolves, the wolves would become docile in the end. And if a wolf led a pack of sheep, the sheep would become ferocious in the end. This principle was very simple, and many people understood it. Therefore, everyone present was very much looking forward to the level of combat strength Xiao Chun would display. Both of them were at the Dao Emperor realm, and a Dao Emperor was an emperor in the martial Dao. It was the final step in the martial Dao, and the next step was the half-saint realm. At the half-saint realm, they didn't pursue the martial Dao any longer, and they pursued the even more ethereal Saint Dao. Therefore, the Dao Emperor realm was said to be the end of the martial Dao. Now, the two young Dao Emperor realm experts, Xiao Chun and Yun Chuan, were about to engage in a shocking battle under the gazes of countless people. Xiao Chun looked at Yun Chuan calmly. He knew very well that he had to win this battle beautifully. At the very least, he had to intimidate everyone present. It wasn't just for himself, it was also for the Sacred Palace. He had to let everyone present know that the first chosen of the Sacred Palace wasn't just for show. "Seen your sister Yin Chuan come." Xiao Chun lightly exhaled and looked at Yin Chuan as he spoke indifferently. Yin Chuan didn't say anything else when she heard this, and a terrifying aura soared into the sky from her body. Just the eruption of this aura alone was enough to make the expressions of most people present change. One had to know that the people present were all sect leaders of various major forces. They had been famous for many years and could be considered as experts of the older generation. However, after sensing the aura coming from Yun Chuan's body, these old fellows had no choice but to admit that Yun Chuan's strength had already surpassed many of them. Even though Yun Chuan was only at the initial stage of the Dao Emperor realm, it wasn't exaggerated to say that in terms of combat strength, Yun Chuan was absolutely invincible in the Dao Emperor realm unless he encountered a saint or saintess of the same realm. He was already invincible in the Dao Emperor realm at such a young age, and it was even to the extent that he was barely able to fight a half-saint. Moreover, it was practically impossible for a half-saint to kill Yun Chuan. With such strength, how could the expressions of everyone present not change? However, compared to these old fellows, Xiao Chun, who was facing Yun Chuan, appeared to be very calm at this time. There was not the slightest bit of panic in his eyes. Yun Chuan was the first to attack. His figure flashed, and he transformed into 3 afterimages that attacked Xiao Chun from 3 different directions. This was the movement technique that Yun Chuan cultivated, and it was a top-grade heaven-rank movement technique. Once it was executed, it could transform into 3 afterimages. Of course, only the main body possessed offensive strength, and the other 2 afterimages were merely used to confuse the opponent. When facing Yun Chuan's attack, Xiao Chun directly executed the stampede of tiger as well. A tiger's roar resounded, and then a lifelike image of a ferocious tiger slowly floated up into appearance behind Xiao Chun. The stampede of tiger was a high-grade heaven-rank martial technique as well, and it wasn't inferior to Yun Chuan's movement technique. However, the emphasis they placed on it was different. He wasn't confused by Yun Chuan's afterimages, and Yun Chuan obviously didn't expect to defeat Xiao Chun with just these 2 afterimages. Xiao Chun's strength was obvious to all the saints and saintesses. Moreover, in terms of talent, Xiao Chun was known as the strongest person. Therefore, it was obviously unrealistic to think that he could confuse Xiao Chun with just these simple afterimages. The 2 of them were extremely fast, and they fought fiercely in the formation. Like Xiao Chun, Yun Chuan's weapon was also a long sword. The 2 swords constantly clashed, and terrifying aftershocks were rampant in the formation. Fortunately, the formation was isolated. Otherwise, the aftershocks of the two's battle would definitely affect the people around them. The battle was very intense, but people with discerning eyes could still see that Xiao Chun had been defending all this time, and he didn't take the initiative to attack. Compared to Xiao Chun, Yin Chuan's attacks were very sharp. However, no matter how Yin Chuan's attacks surged like a tide, Xiao Chun's defense was still impenetrable. In fact, Yin Chuan's strength should be at the bottom of the sacred palace's 10 great saints and saintesses. Moreover, their cultivations were similar, so Xiao Chun still had a great chance of winning against Yin Chuan. After fighting fiercely for a quarter of an hour, Xiao Chun finally switched from defense to offense. The ink dragon Jian, ink in his hand, changed its previous defensive stance and took the initiative to stab at Yin Chuan. After switching from defense to offense, Xiao Chun gradually gained the upper hand. At the same time, the tempered battle body, the laws of strength, and the laws of speed were all displayed. Xiao Chun quickly gained the upper hand. Under the enhancement of the precepts of force and speed, every strike was not only extremely fast, but also extremely powerful. Therefore, after exchanging a few blows with Xiao Chun, Yin Chuan felt that his right hand, which was holding the sword, could not help but tremble slightly. The tremendous power made Yin Chuan not dare to meet Xiao Chun head-on. In this regard, Xiao Chun obviously wouldn't give Yin Chuan such an opportunity. He firmly entangled Yin Chuan, and after a few hundred exchanges, Yin Chuan was already at a disadvantage. Yin Chuan didn't dare to meet the sword strike head-on and could only dodge to the side. Seizing this opportunity, Xiao Chun directly pointed out with his finger, instantly displaying the shadow-bearing sword finger. The shadow-bearing finger sword was the most powerful attack that Xiao Chun had mastered at the moment. Furthermore, after years of training, it had reached the transcendent plane. With a single point, sword light flashed and attacked Yin Chuan like lightning. In the face of Xiao Chun's attack, Yin Chuan's expression changed. He didn't dare to be careless, and immediately wanted to raise his sword to block. Unfortunately, the power of the shadow-bearing sword finger was too great. The two of them flipped the table, and the long sword in Yin Chuan's hand flew out. Without the long sword in his hand, on the other side, before Yin Chuan could react, Xiao Chun had already arrived. The tip of his sword gently pressed against Yin Chuan's throat, leaving only an inch of distance. With the long sword pressed against Yin Chuan's throat, Xiao Chun said indifferently, "Senior Sister Yin Chuan, you've lost." After an hour of fierce battle, Xiao Chun finally won. Looking at the scene before them, the surrounding people were stunned. It wasn't that they were surprised by Xiao Chun's victory, but that the battle between the two of them was really too exciting. A battle of this level wasn't inferior to a fierce battle between two half-saints. Please add it to your collection. Monthly vote recommended. In a chapter. Chapter 956. The battle between Xiao Chun and Yin Chuan ended with Xiao Chun's victory. This outcome was actually not unexpected for Xiao Sheng and the other four ancestors. After all, Yin Chuan did not have much of a chance of winning against Xiao Chun at the same cultivation level. However, Yin Chuan's combat strength was indeed extraordinary. At the very least, she was able to block Xiao Chun's strongest attack, the shadow-bearing sword finger. If it was any other Dao Emperor stage expert, even if Xiao Chun's shadow-bearing sword finger could not directly kill them, it would definitely be enough to heavily injure them. However, Yin Chuan had successfully blocked it and even sent the sword in her hand flying. In fact, she could be said to be completely unharmed. The gap in strength between the 10 great chosen of the sacred palace was not too great. At the very least, it was not easy for Xiao Chun to defeat Yin Chuan. Moreover, this was merely an ordinary spar. If it was a battle of life and death, even if Xiao Chun could defeat Yin Chuan, it would probably be even more troublesome to kill her. It was even possible that Yin Chuan would escape. After the battle with Yin Chuan, Xiao Chun secretly estimated that if he wanted to kill Yin Chuan, he would only have a 70% chance of success. Moreover, he would have to go all out. As soon as Xiao Qian finished speaking, Yun Chuan was not a sore loser. She nodded and revealed a faint smile on her face as she said, Junior brother Xiao is indeed someone who has changed after 3 days. I admit defeat. She very calmly admitted her defeat. Seeing this, Xiao Chun took the initiative to sheath his sword and said with a smile, Senior Sister Yun Chuan, thank you for letting me win. The result had already been decided. Following this, no one continued to insist on Xiao Qin's position as the first chosen saint. Of course, people like Chen Yu, Chen Ling, and Long Qing naturally wouldn't challenge Xiao Qin. As for the remaining people, after witnessing the battle between Xiao Chun and Yun Chuan, they also let go of the dissatisfaction in their hearts and acknowledged Xiao Qin's strength. After all, Xiao Chun had been reputed to have the strongest natural talent amongst all the holy sons and holy virgins on the heavenly river continent. At that time, Xiao Qin's only shortcoming was his cultivation. After all, Xiao Chun was young, and there was still a gap between his cultivation and theirs. But now, Xiao Chun had broken through to the Tao Emperor realm, and the gap between their cultivations had been closed. Once the gap between their cultivations wasn't too great, there was naturally no need to doubt Xiao Qin's strength. With the joint recommendation of the 4 ancestors and Xiao Qin's various performances on the heavenly river continent, the position of the first chosen saint was taken by Xiao Chun without much resistance. The first chosen saint of the sacred palace had been confirmed, and it was Xiao Chun. Next, the chosen saint ranking battle would officially begin. In fact, the rules of the chosen saint ranking battle were simple. First, the second chosen saint would be determined. Anyone who felt that they could become the second chosen saint could enter the arena and accept the challenges of the other holy sons and holy virgins. The person who remained on the arena in the end would become the second chosen saint. The rules of the chosen saint ranking battle were very simple and crude. As the ranking battle officially began, Chun Ling, who was sitting beside Xiao Chun, was the first to stand up and say, I'll go first. As he spoke, Chun Ling slowly walked into the array and waited for the other holy sons and holy virgins to challenge him. Chun Ling was the first to stand up and compete for the position of the second chosen saint. Soon, a handsome young man stood up. This person was called by Yi, and he was once the first chosen saint of the Sky Saint sect. Him entering the arena now meant that he also wanted the position of the second chosen saint. The first battle of the chosen saint ranking battle was between Chun Ling and Bai Yi. The holy sons were no strangers to Bai Yi. After all, he was already the first chosen of the Sky Saint sect. On the other hand, to be honest, the holy sons did not know much about Chun Ling. In the array, Chun Ling and Bai Yi stood facing each other. Bai Yi slowly opened his mouth and said, Brother Chun Ling, actually, I've always been very interested in you. Oh, that would be my honor. Hearing this, Chun Ling lightly smiled as he replied, I've seen you fight with the demon race's demon son, so I know that you're very strong. I've wanted to fight with you for a long time. It seems that today is the best opportunity. Bai Yi said indifferently. In the war with the demon race, Bai Yi had seen the battle between Chun Ling and the demon race's demon son. Since then, Bai Yi had always been very interested in Chun Ling. As he spoke, a terrifying aura erupted from Bai Yi's body. This aura was slightly stronger than Yun Chuan's from before. Clearly, Bai Yi was stronger than Yun Chuan. Bai Yi took the lead. Following Bai Yi's attack, the Sacred Palace's chosen saint ranking battle officially began. Bai Yi and Chun Ling immediately clashed. Looking at the two people fighting fiercely in the array, Xiao Chun could remember that this was the first time Chun Ling had displayed his strength in front of so many people. Although Xiao Chun had always known that Chun Ling was very strong, in the eyes of outsiders, Chun Ling was a very mysterious person who rarely fought in front of everyone. It was also because of this that the crowd began to discuss Chun Ling when they saw that Bai Yi and Chun Ling were locked in battle. After all, Bai Yi was once the first chosen of the Sky Saint sect, and now Chun Ling was actually able to fight him to a standstill. The battle lasted for a full 8 hours before a victor was finally decided. Chun Ling's skills were better, and he won. After the end of the first battle, Chunling was given 4 hours to rest. After 4 hours, the other holy sons could continue their challenges. However, what no one expected was that after Chunling defeated by Yi, no one continued to challenge him. Chunyu had no intention of challenging him at all. In the end, Chunling successfully took the position of the second chosen. The chosen saint ranking battle lasted for a full 4 days. For the people present, 4 days without sleep was no longer a problem for them at their cultivation level. Therefore, everyone present watched the chosen's ranking battle with great interest. Even after the last battle of the chosen's ranking battle ended, they still hadn't recovered from their shock. After 4 days of intense battles, the 10 chosen of the sacred palace were finally ranked. First chosen, Xiaochun. Second chosen, Chunling. Third chosen, Longqing. Fourth chosen, Chunyu. Fifth chosen, Emperor Qing. Sixth chosen, Bai Yi. Seventh chosen, Quanlan. Eighth chosen, Hu Fei. Ninth chosen, Yin Chuan. 10th chosen, Jiang Yu. These were the final rankings of the 10 chosen of the sacred palace after 4 days of intense battles. It was no exaggeration to say that these 4 days were a visual feast for everyone present. Moreover, the sacred palace had also shown everyone a little of the sacred palace's strength through the chosen saint ranking battle. Any one of the 10 chosen could beat up cultivators of the same cultivation level. Moreover, even the weakest, the 10th chosen, Jiang Yu, had the strength to fight against a half-saint. Of course, for the saints and saintesses, combat strength was secondary. The most important thing was their potential, which was what made people fear them the most. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 9, 57. In these 4 days, the 10 chosens of the sacred palace had shown everyone the strength of the sacred palace. Xiao Sheng and the other patriarchs were naturally happy to see this. They believed that after this ceremony, the sacred palace's position in the hearts of these people would become unshakable. In the future, as long as the sacred palace did not fall, all forces on the heavenly Chun continent and the Tiana continent could only bow their heads to it. With the end of the Chosen's ranking battle, the rankings of the 10 Chosens were finally determined. Of course, there were still some surprises. First of all, Chunyu was only ranked 4th in the Chosen's ranking battle, behind Xiao Chun, Chunling, and Longqing. Originally, everyone thought that with Chunyu's strength, there should be no problem for him to be ranked 2nd. However, Chunyu did not seem to be interested in the Chosen's ranking battle, so he did not choose to challenge Chunling and Longqing at all. Even the position of 4th Chosens could be said to be beyond Chunyu's ability. Other than Chunyu, there was also Bai Yi. In the Holy Sun ranking battle this time, Bai Yi was only ranked 6th. This was something that no one had expected. As the former first chosen of the Heavenly Saints sect, Bai Yi had actually lost to Emperor Qing in the competition for the 5th chosen position. Unknowingly, Emperor Qing's strength had surpassed Bai Yi, which was also a result that no one had expected. Of course, other than these 2 things that were more surprising, the rest could be considered as expected. However, it was undeniable that the 10 chosens of the sacred palace were indeed ridiculously strong. In fact, this was mostly due to the war with the demon race. It was precisely because of the 8 years of bloody war with the demon race that Xiao Chun and the others could be said to have completed a complete transformation. Of the chosens of the Tiana continent, only the 10 of them had survived. As such, they had climbed out from a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood, and their strength was naturally far greater than before. With the end of the Chosen's ranking battle, the Sacred Palace's founding ceremony was also announced. The various sect masters of the outer palaces also left one after another. As the sect masters of the outer palaces of the Sacred Palace, they did not have the qualifications to live in the holy region, so they naturally had to leave after the ceremony ended. With the departure of the sect masters of the outer palaces, the holy region quickly quieted down. The next step was to establish the Sacred Palaces system. According to the expectations of Xiao Sheng and the other 4 patriarchs, the Sacred Palace had the positions of patriarch, saint, elders, and deacons. At the same time, the disciples would be chosens, saintesses, prospective chosens, direct disciples, core, ordinary and unnamed disciples. Among them, there was no need to mention the patriarch. Xiao Sheng and the other three were the strongest in the sacred palace. At the same time, they were also the highest leaders in charge of everything in the sacred palace. Unlike the ancient sacred sect and heavenly sacred sect, the saints no longer held the position of elder in the sacred palace. Instead, they were saint venerables. Like the patriarchs, they did not participate in the daily management of the sacred palace and focused all their attention on cultivation. Unless something major happened, the saint venerables and patriarchs would not easily show their faces. This was the main task of the patriarchs and saint venerables. They were the pillars of the sacred palace and ensured that the sacred palace would prosper forever. On the other hand, the elders below them were half-saints, and the officers were Tao Emperor realm experts. At the same time, the sacred palace established the 10 sacred palaces, with the 10 chosens and saintesses as palace masters. All the rules in the 10 sacred palaces were set by the chosens and saintesses themselves. At the same time, the elders and half-saints of the sacred palace would belong to different sacred palaces and listen to the orders of their respective palace masters. Of course, in addition to the 10 sacred palaces, the sacred palace also established the mission hall, martial skills hall, and various cultivation secret realms. These were all managed by the saint venerables. Of course, the saint venerables would not show their faces. They just had to follow the rules. Apart from the above, the prospective chosens, prospective saintesses, direct disciples, core disciples, and ordinary disciples were not much different from the ancient sacred sect and heavenly sacred sect. The only thing worth mentioning was the nominal disciples. This was something the ancient sacred sect and heavenly sacred sect did not have. These nominal disciples were existences between the inner and outer palace disciples. Their talent was inferior to the inner palace disciples, but they were stronger than the outer palace disciples. Therefore, these nominal disciples could live and cultivate in the sacred region, but they were not qualified to enter the sacred mountains. The so-called sacred mountains were the dozens of mountains floating in the sky where the sacred palace was located. They were not qualified to enter the sacred mountains. Xiao Sheng and the other patriarchs had specially built a small city for them in the sacred region. These nominal disciples lived and cultivated in this small city until they became true inner palace disciples one day. At that time, they would be able to enter the sacred mountains. The entire system of the sacred palace was read out to everyone. Compared to the ancient sacred sect and heavenly sacred sect, the new system of the sacred palace was undoubtedly more distinct. The treatment that disciples of each level could receive was very different. The 10 chosens and saintesses had undoubtedly become the most powerful people in the sacred palace. This was because the patriarchs and sacred venerables were basically in charge. Therefore, in the entire sacred palace, the 10 chosens and saintesses had the final say. A handbook about the sacred palace had been issued to every disciple. The next day, Xiao Sheng and the other patriarchs also called Xiao Chun and the other chosens and saintesses to the main hall of the central peak. Now that the chosens' ranking battle was over and the rankings of the chosens and saintesses had been confirmed, the next 10 halls were up to them to establish themselves. Once the 10 halls were established, the current sacred palace disciples would have to choose a different sacred palace to join. In the main hall, Xiao Sheng and the other 3 patriarchs sat on the main seats, while Xiao Chun and the other 5 patriarchs stood side by side. Xiao Sheng chuckled as he looked at the 10 of them. The establishment of the 10 sacred palaces will be up to you. Apart from the rules and regulations of the sacred palace, you can make your own decisions regarding the rules of the 10 sacred palaces. I believe that such a small matter will not be difficult for you. Xiao Chun and the others were fully in charge of the 10 sacred palaces, including the rules and regulations of the 10 sacred palaces. This also meant that from now on, the rules and regulations of each sacred palace would be different. This was because the rules of each sacred palace would be decided by the chosens and saintesses of each sacred palace. Naturally, there would be differences. Xiao Chun and the others nodded in agreement when they heard Xiao Sheng's words. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 958. Xiao Chun and the others left the hall and headed to their respective main peaks. The idea behind the construction of the sacred palace was very simple. The central peak was naturally where Xiao Sheng, the four ancestors, and the saints resided. At the same time, it was the most central location of the entire sacred palace, and it was the largest. 10 slightly smaller peaks floated around the central peak. These 4 peaks were the main peaks of the 10 sacred halls, and 90 smaller peaks floated around the main peaks of the 10 sacred halls. These 90 peaks belonged to different sacred halls. Every single main peak was surrounded by 9 similar peaks, and these peaks were where the disciples would live in the future. The central peak was where the ancestors and heavenly venerables resided, whereas the main peak was where the chosen, and elders resided. As for the personal disciples, core disciples, and ordinary disciples below them, they naturally resided on the 90 smaller peaks. They returned to the main peaks that belonged to them. None of the peaks had been named yet. Naturally, it was up to the chosen and saintesses to name them. After all, they would be the masters of the 10 sacred palaces in the future. Even the half-saint elders would have to obey the orders of the chosen and saintesses. Xiao Chun went straight back to his residence, which was located at the top of the main peak of the Sage Hall. He sat in the backyard with Qin Shru and the others, and they discussed the matter of establishing the sacred halls. The 4 ancestors had only given them 3 days. They had to complete the construction of the sacred halls within 3 days, and then the disciples would be divided into different sacred halls. According to Xiao Sheng, every single sacred hall would have 20 half-saint elders, 50 Tao emperor attendants, 10 chosen and chosen saints, 200 personal disciples, and countless core and ordinary disciples. However, based on the current situation, every single sacred hall had to have at least 20,000 disciples. Actually, there wasn't much that needed to be done with the construction of the sacred halls. The construction had been completed a long time ago, and all that was left was for Xiao Chun and the other chosen to name their respective sacred halls and determine the rules and regulations. Only then would the 10 sacred halls be established. Xiao Chun was too lazy to think about the name of his temple. He directly decided to call it the Dustless Temple. The temple that belonged to Xiao Chun was named Wuchen Temple. As for the rules and regulations of Wuchen Temple, Xiao Chun directly threw them to Qin Shru and the other 2 women. Anyway, Xiao Chun had no interest in these trivial matters. Xiao Chun didn't care about anything else other than naming the divine temple. On the next day, the 20 half-saint elders and 50 Tao Emperor realm attendants that the 4 ancestors had sent to Wuchen Divine Hall arrived at Wuchen Divine Hall. These people would become Xiao Chun's right-hand men in the future, assisting Xiao Chun in managing everything in the Unsullied Temple. Xiao Chun wasn't too excited by their arrival. Even though the 20 half-saints and 50 Tao Emperor realm experts would obey his orders from now on, Xiao Chun still wasn't too excited. Residences were arranged for everyone on Dustless Sacred Peak. The saints had expended a great deal of effort in the construction of the sacred palace this time. It wasn't just Xiao Chun and the other saints. Even the prospective saints, half-saint elders, and Tao Emperor realm attendants had their own residences. There were an entire few tens of residences on Wuchen Peak, and they stretched from the middle of the mountain all the way to the top. Of course, the residence at the top belonged to Xiao Chun. 3 days later, Xiao Chun and the other chosen had finished dealing with the matters of the 10 sacred halls. At the same time, the numerous disciples of the sacred palace had joined the various sacred halls. Every sacred hall had 20,000 disciples. When the disciples were choosing their sacred halls, the Wuchen sacred hall that belonged to Xiao Chun was clearly the most popular. As for the prodigies of the heavenly Chun continent like Gudu Wuya, Huangfu Ao, and the others, their first choice was naturally the Wuchen sacred hall. After so many years of tempering, Gudu Wuya and the others' improvement was far inferior to Xiao Chun. Not to mention Xiao Chun, even Qin Shru and the other 2 girls were far inferior. However, Gudu Wuya and the others had all become chosen of the sacred palace, and their strength was much stronger than before. The disciples didn't hesitate to choose the sacred hall they liked. After they chose their sacred halls, their attire in the future would have the symbol of their respective sacred halls. For example, the disciples of Wuchen's sacred hall had a small golden sword embroidered on their chest, indicating that they were disciples of the sacred palace of Wuchen's sacred hall. After the 10 sacred halls were completed, the disciples successively joined them. Xiao Chen's Wuchen's sacred hall, Chun Ling's Ling Yun's sacred hall, Long Qing's 10,000 Dragon sacred hall, Chun Yu's ethereal sacred hall, Qing Emperor's imperial sacred hall, Bai Yi's heavenly white sacred hall, Quan Lan's Quan Lan sacred hall, Hu Fei's 100 battle shrines, Yin Chuan's flowing rain sacred hall, Jiang Yu's mountain sacred hall. The 10 sacred halls became the sacred palace's autonomy. At the same time, with the completion of the 10 sacred halls, the sacred palace gradually became more precious. Xiao Sheng and the other 3 ancestors also personally set off to the Tiana continent to move the cultivation mystic realms of the ancient sacred sect, heavenly sacred sect, and sun sacred sect into the sacred region. Everything in the sacred palace was progressing in a good direction. However, no one knew that on a continent far away from the Tianqian continent, there was a continuous mountain range. In the depths of the mountain range, which should have been deserted, there was a cluster of buildings. This was the location of the Fallen River Sacred Sect. No one on the Tianqian continent had heard of the Fallen River Sacred Sect. However, on the way to the Tianqian continent, Xiao Chun and the others saved a sacred son of the Fallen River Sacred Sect named Wang Luo. Wang Luo was the only son of the sect master of the Fallen River Sacred Sect. Perhaps Xiao Chun and the others had forgotten about Wang Luo and the Fallen River Sacred Sect, but Wang Luo hadn't. To be precise, he hadn't forgotten about 100 Flower Fairy. After such a long time, Wang Luo had already sent people to inquire about 100 Flower Fairy. At this moment, in a beautiful cave residence, Wang Luo was sitting in the main hall. He looked at the 4 middle-aged men below him and asked in a low voice, "What? You still haven't found the beauty I'm looking for?" Hearing Wang Luo's words, one of them respectfully replied, "Young sect master, please calm down. We have tried our best to find her. We have searched all the continents in the starry sky, including the Blood Demon continent, the Tiana continent, and the recently discovered Northern Demon continent. We have sent people to look for her, but we haven't found any clues." Wang Luo was very annoyed that they still hadn't found 100 Flower Fairy's whereabouts. Just as he was about to scold them, another middle-aged man spoke first. "Young sect master, we have sent people to the Tiana continent and the other 2 continents. However, there is still one continent that we haven't searched." "Oh, where is it?" "The Tianqian continent. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 9:59. There were only 4 continents in the starry sky where he met Flower Fairy: the Tiana continent, the Northern Demon continent, the Blood Demon continent, and the Tianqian continent. Other than the Tianqian continent, the Falling River Saint sect had sent people to the other 3 continents with Flower Fairy's portrait, but there was still no news of her. It was hard to imagine that Flower Fairy, whom Wang Luo had only met once, would be so unforgettable. When he heard that there was still a Tianqian continent that had not been searched, Wang Luo stood up and said without hesitation, "Okay, such a beauty must be on the Tianqian continent. This time, I will go personally." Although they had only met once, 100 Flower Fairy had already left an indelible impression in Wang Luo's heart. In Wang Luo's heart, he had to obtain 100 Flower Fairy no matter what. If he could obtain such a beauty, Wang Luo would not hesitate to use any means. Seeing that Wang Luo planned to go personally to the Tianqian continent, the 3 experts of the Falling River Saint sect were not surprised. During this period, ever since Wang Luo returned to the Falling River Saint sect, it was as if he had been bewitched. His heart was always with Flower Fairy, and from time to time, he would stare at Flower Fairy's portrait in a daze. His face was full of infatuation, as if his soul had been taken away. This portrait of Flower Fairy was based on Wang Luo's memory and was made by the best artist in the Falling River Saint sect. It looked very lifelike, and through the portrait, the experts of the Falling River Saint sect knew that Flower Fairy was indeed indescribably beautiful. As the young sect leader of the Fallen River Saint sect, Wang Luo could be said to have gotten whatever he wanted since he was young. Of course, he was also considered to have lived up to expectations. His talent was not bad, so he became the holy son of the Fallen River Saint sect. However, due to his noble status, Wang Luo's personality was obviously somewhat arrogant and domineering. As long as he wanted something, there was nothing he could not get. Therefore, this time, he had his eyes on Flower Fairy. This was the first time Wang Luo had been so obsessed with a woman. So no matter what, Wang Luo must obtain Flower Fairy. 3 days later, Wang Luo left the Falling River Saint sect accompanied by the experts of the Falling River Saint sect. They boarded a starship and headed straight to the Tianqian continent. This time, Wang Luo brought along 2 saints of the Falling River Saint sect. He didn't take the heavenly Chan continent seriously. After all, the heavenly Qin continent was just a small continent. The Fallen River Holy Sect was a powerful saint-level family. There were no less than 15 saint realm experts in the sect. They were very powerful. However, Wang Luo did not expect that his trip to the heavenly Chun continent would not only cost him his life, but also the Fallen River Saint sect that had been passed down for thousands of years. This was because the Tianqian continent now had the Sacred Palace, and the Sacred Palace was a quasi-saint clan. It was on a completely different level from the Falling River Saint sect. Wang Luo did not know this until now. He was very interested in the Tianqian continent. At the same time, in the sacred region of the Tianqian continent, the Ten Saints Temple had been completed. All the disciples had joined the Ten Saints Temple, and Shao Chun and the other saints and saintesses had received Holy Sun robes personally made by Shao Sheng and the other patriarchs. The golden robes were very wide, and the bottom reached the ankles. There was a huge saint word on the back. This was the Holy Sun robes that Shao Sheng and the other patriarchs had specially designed for the 10 saints and saintesses of the Sacred Palace. Not only was it a symbol of status, but it was also a very good defensive treasure that had reached the top of the saint level. The Holy Sun robes were personally made by the patriarchs, and the many disciples below had received brand new Sacred Palace disciple robes according to their different positions. Not only the disciples, but the elders, deacons, and saint venerables also received their own Sacred Palace robes. Under the operation of the 10 Saints Temple, the Sacred Palace was gradually on the right track, and the disciples slowly adapted to life in the Sacred Palace. At the same time, Shao Sheng and the other patriarchs had moved all the cultivation mystic realms of the Ancient Saints sect, the Heavenly Saints sect, and the Sun Saints sect from the Tiana continent into the sacred region. Now, in the sacred region, it could be said that all the cultivation holy lands of the Tiana continent and the Tianqian continent had been gathered. The cultivation environment was simply incredible. With such a good cultivation environment and a large number of cultivation mystic realms, the disciples of the Sacred Palace believed that there would soon be a period of explosive growth, and everyone's strength would be able to make a qualitative leap. While continuing to develop the sacred region, Shao Sheng and the other patriarchs were also preparing to send people to the Blood Demon continent to completely exterminate the demonic cultivators, so that they would not have the slightest chance to counterattack. This time, the expedition to the Blood Demon continent was led by Prime Saint Ice Lotus, and at the same time, 10 saints accompanied her. Moreover, among the 10 saints' temples, Jiang Yu's Mountain Temple and Yunchuan's Rainwater Temple would be involved. The 2 holy temples' disciples were in charge of attacking the Blood Demon continent. This was the ancestors' decision. Without wasting any time, Prime Saint Ice Lotus led the disciples of the 2 holy temples and 10 holy sovereigns to leave the Heavenly Star continent and head towards the Blood Demon continent. Only the Mountain Temple and Rainwater Temple of the 10 Saints' temples had received the order to attack the Blood Demon continent. Regarding this, the saints and saintesses of the other 7 temples would inevitably have some small complaints. On this day, Shao Chun was originally cultivating in his cave when the Qing Emperor, Chen Yu, and Hu Fei came looking for him. Sitting in a circle in the garden, Hu Fei, who was a battle maniac, said unhappily as soon as he arrived, "Damn it, if Jiang Yu can lead people to attack the Blood Demon Temple, why can't my Temple of 100 Battles go as well?" Hu Fei said angrily. Previously, he had personally gone to find the 4 patriarchs and wanted to lead people from the Temple of 100 Battles to the Blood Demon Continent. Unfortunately, he was rejected by the patriarchs. After all, the Blood Demon Continent could be said to be basically crippled. Moreover, with Prime Saint Ice Lotus leading the team this time, the 2 temples were actually more than enough. Hu Fei's Temple of 100 Battles did not need to participate. Hu Fei was naturally unhappy that he did not get the opportunity to attack the Blood Demon Continent. Hearing this, Xiao Chun could only smile helplessly. Senior brother Hu Fei, good things have to be used on the edge of the blade. If the Sacred Palace still needs to go all out against the Blood Demon Continent, wouldn't it be a joke? Don't worry, this battle will be fought by you in the future. Xiao Chun knew Hu Fei too well. As soon as Xiao Chun finished speaking, a half-step Saint Elder of the Wuchen Temple hurriedly ran in. He did not even have time to salute Xiao Chun. "Saint, an unidentified starship has arrived at the Tianshan continent. It seems like it wants to land on the Tianshan continent. The Saint Venerables have asked the Wuchen Temple to send people to take a look. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 960. A starship landed on the heavenly Qin continent. Upon hearing the elder's words, Xiao Chun pondered for a moment before replying indifferently. "Then you can arrange for someone to go." He didn't care too much about this matter. After all, the heavenly Qin continent was no longer a continent that had no contact with the outside world. To be honest, the establishment of the Sacred Palace meant that they would have to deal with other continents in the future. Therefore, Xiao Chun directly put the half-saint elder in charge of this matter. However, Xiao Chun clearly didn't expect that this starship would come from the Fallen River Saint sect. Wang Luo was also on this starship. It had to be said that this guy had traveled thousands of miles to deliver his head on a silver platter. Upon hearing Xiao Chun's words, the half-saint elder nodded in response and immediately arranged for someone to check the starship. The Sacred Palace didn't have any hostility towards this starship that had suddenly landed. If it were cultivators from other continents, the Sacred Palace wouldn't recommend playing host to them. Chun Yu and the other 2 didn't say much about Xiao Chun's arrangements. After all, this was the Dustless Temple's matter, and they didn't have the authority to command Xiao Chun. Xiao Chun stopped thinking about this matter and continued to chat with Chun Yu and the other 2. Of course, the main topic was Hu Fei's complaint. The trip to the Blood Demon Continent this time had excluded him from the Temple of 100 Battles, which made Hu Fei very unhappy. While Xiao Chun and the others were chatting, the starship from the Fallen River Saint sect directly landed on the heavenly Qin continent. At the same time, the half-saint elder that Xiao Chun had met before also appeared above the starship with a few disciples of the Dustless Temple. As Wang Luo and the other experts of the Fallen River Saint sect arrived on the deck, the half-saint elder from the Dustless Temple slowly descended and cupped his hands towards Wang Luo and the others in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. "I am an elder of the Divine Palace's Dustless Temple. May I ask where you are from?" Since he didn't know the identity and purpose of Wang Luo and the others, the elder's tone was still calm. Hearing this, Wang Luo was obviously used to being arrogant and didn't return the greeting. He even snorted and said, "It's none of your business." Wang Luo completely ignored the elder. Hearing Wang Luo's words, the elder's face darkened. Fortunately, a young man beside Wang Luo smiled and said, "Holy Sun, this person looks like a native of the heavenly Qin continent. Since we're here to look for someone, why don't you show him the portrait? Maybe he knows something." He guessed that this elder was a native of the heavenly Qin continent. Hearing this, Wang Luo immediately smiled and said, "That's right." After being reminded by the young man, Wang Luo quickly took out the portrait of 100 Flower Fairy from his storage ring, looked at the elder, and asked as if it was an order, "Let me ask you, have you seen the woman in this painting?" Wang Luo's attitude made the elder very unhappy. However, when he saw the woman in the painting, the elder was stunned. Wasn't this the wife of the Holy Sun Xiao Chun, the Holy Sun, 100-flower fairy? Why would Wang Luo have her portrait? The elder was a little stunned. Looking at his expression, Wang Luo was not a fool and quickly guessed that this elder must know 100-flower fairy. After searching for so long, he finally had some clues today. Wang Luo was overjoyed and immediately shouted to the two saints of the Fallen River Holy Sect behind him. Take it down. Since this elder knew 100-flower fairy, there was nothing more to say. Take him down and then slowly interrogate him. Wang Luo's style of doing things was very domineering. Of course, as the young sect master of the Fallen River Holy Sect, he was qualified to do so. Even the other holy sons and holy daughters of the Fallen River Holy Sect didn't dare to be too presumptuous in front of Wang Luo. There was no other way, who asked him to have a good background. However, Wang Luo clearly didn't expect that this was the heavenly Chun continent, where the sacred palace was located and not his Fallen River Holy Sect. Therefore, when he heard Wang Luo's words, the half-step Saint Elder's face darkened. Without hesitation, he directly used a voice transmission talisman and sent the entire matter back to the dustless sacred hall. He had already seen that the two middle-aged men standing behind Wang Luo were Saint Realm experts, so the elder wasn't stupid enough to fight them head-on. Instead, he immediately sent the news back to the sacred palace. Xiao Chun, who was in the dustless sacred hall, was chatting with Cheng Yu and the other two when he suddenly received the elder's message. Noticing the change in Xiao Chen's expression, Cheng Yu and the other two asked, "What happened? What's wrong?" There is no need to hide it from the three of them, so Xiao Chun directly told them about Wang Luo. Hearing this, Hu Fei was the first to stand up and shout, "Which force is this person from? How dare he be so arrogant?" Junior brother Xiao Chun, let's go and take a look. Hu Fei, who was already suppressing his anger, naturally couldn't hold it in when he heard that Wang Luo was so ignorant. Seeing this, Xiao Chun didn't stop Hu Fei this time. The four of them planned to take a look together, but before they left, the four of them ran into Qin Shu and the other two girls. When they heard that someone was causing trouble on the heavenly Chun continent, Gu Lingyao immediately expressed that she wanted to go with them. In the end, Xiao Chun had no choice but to bring the three girls along. In the elder's voice transmission, he also told Xiao Chun that there was a saint in Wang Luo's group. Therefore, when Xiao Chun left the dustless sacred hall, he also ordered people to inform the saint's sovereigns of this matter. They left the sacred region directly. As the distance wasn't far, Xiao Chun and the others soon arrived above Wang Luo's spaceship. However, when they appeared, they immediately saw that the dustless sacred hall elder and a few other disciples had been forcefully captured by Wang Luo. At this time, on the deck of the starship, Wang Luo was sitting in his seat, while the elder's cultivation was sealed, and he was being interrogated by Wang Luo. Looking at the miserable appearance of the elder, it was obvious that he had been beaten up. Seeing this, Xiao Chun and the others' faces darkened. However, Chen Yu was the first to notice Wang Luo. Looking at Wang Luo, Chen Yu helplessly smiled bitterly. "Junior brother Xiao Chun, I'm afraid he's here to make trouble for you." Xiao Chun still didn't remember who Wang Luo was. Chen Yu pointed at Wang Luo and asked, "Senior brother Chen Yu, why do you say that?" "Junior brother, you really don't remember him?" With Chen Yu's reminder, Xiao Chun finally remembered who Wang Luo was this time. At the same time, Wang Luo and the others also noticed Xiao Chun and the others standing in the air. When they looked up, Wang Luo immediately saw 100-flower fairy standing beside Xiao Chun. He immediately stood up and looked at 100-flower fairy in surprise. "Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 961. With Chen Yu's reminder, Xiao Chun finally remembered who Wang Luo was. He did not expect that Wang Luo, whom he had accidentally saved in space, would chase them all the way to Tianqian continent. Xiao Chen's eyes flashed coldly. From the way Wang Luo looked at Flower Fairy, How could Xiao Chun not know his intentions? It was obvious that he had chased Flower Fairy all the way here. Xiao Chun had guessed everything, and so did Chun Yu and the others. As for the three women, Qin Shiru's expression was cold and murderous. It was obvious that Wang Luo's actions had made Qin Shiru very unhappy. The three women were not only Xiao Chen's chess pieces, but they were also his brothers in love. Now that Wang Luo had the audacity to chase Flower Fairy all the way to Tianjin Continent, how could Qin Shiru not be angry? Like Qin Shiru, Flower Fairy's expression was also cold. However, she also secretly observed Xiao Chen's expression. Seeing that Xiao Chen was fine, she was relieved. Just as Xiao Chun and the others guessed Wang Luo's intentions, Wang Luo led the people of the Fallen River Holy Sect into the air. They were protected by two saints of the Fallen River Holy Sect. Flying in front of Xiao Chun and the others, Wang Luo ignored them all and only had eyes for Flower Fairy. She was still as beautiful as ever. No wonder Wang Luo dreamed of her. Wang Luo said to Flower Fairy with what he thought was a gentle smile on his face, "Beauty, you really made it difficult for me to find you." Indeed, in order to find Flower Fairy, Wang Luo had spent a lot of effort. However, seeing the goddess of his dreams again, Wang Luo felt that all his efforts were worth it. However, in response to Wang Luo's words, Flower Fairy coldly replied, "As the saying goes, there's a way to solve a disaster, but there is no escape from a disaster brought on by oneself." Originally, Wang Luo was just a passerby to Xiao Chun. But now that he had chased him all the way to the heavenly Chan continent, Xiao Chun had no reason to let him go. Although they could tell that there were two saints standing on either side of Wang Luo, it didn't matter. This was the heavenly Chan continent, the headquarters of the sacred palace. Even if a quasi-saint came here, Xiao Sheng's group of four wouldn't be able to kill them, let alone two saints. Even if they couldn't kill them, they could only end up fleeing in panic. So, Xiao Chen didn't take Wang Luo and the other two saints seriously at all. As for the other disciples and elders of the Fallen River Saint sect, they were like ants to him. Seeing how infatuated Wang Luo was with the 100-Flower Fairy, Xiao Chen was too lazy to say anything more. He directly used a sound transmission talisman and told Xiao Sheng what had happened here. Since Wang Luo dared to chase them all the way to the heavenly Chan continent, Xiao Chen dared to make him stay here forever, regardless of his identity. In this starry sky, there might be many sacred sects, but there were definitely not many quasi-saint sections. Moreover, the sacred palace had 4 quasi-saints, so they had the confidence to not fear anyone. He directly told Xiao Sheng what had happened through the sound transmission talisman. Wang Luo didn't stop Xiao Chen's actions. Perhaps in his opinion, Xiao Chen couldn't make any waves at all, or perhaps he thought that the Fallen River Saint sect was strong enough, at least in this small heavenly Qin continent. With only the 100-Flower Fairy in his eyes, Hu Fei, who was the most impulsive, couldn't help but shout angrily in the face of Wang Luo's overbearing attitude. "Boy, you're courting death." Hu Fei couldn't help but shout at Wang Luo for looking at the 100-Flower Fairy so unscrupulously in front of everyone. In response to Hu Fei's angry shout, Wang Luo looked at Xiao Chun and the others and found that they were all familiar faces that he had seen in the starry sky. Wang Luo said indifferently, "Since you've repelled the space bandits, I'll spare your lives. Scram, such a beauty is not someone you can profane." Wang Luo did not seem to care about Xiao Chun and the others at all. Seeing this, Hu Fei was even more furious. Even the Qing Emperor exuded a faint murderous aura. Only Chun Yu still looked relaxed. Obviously, he did not take Wang Luo's words to heart. Perhaps in Chun Yu's opinion, Wang Luo was already a dying man, so there was no point in arguing with him. He didn't take Xiao Chun and the others seriously at all. Obviously, Wang Luo hadn't heard of the sacred palace either. However, just as he finished speaking, a saint of the Fallen River Saint sect beside him whispered to him, "Young sect master, I'm afraid something's wrong." Except for Hu Fei, Xiao Chun and the others didn't show the slightest panic. They were still so calm in the face of 2 saints. What did this mean? It meant that Xiao Chun and the others didn't fear Wang Luo and the Fallen River Saint sect behind them at all. Of course, Xiao Chun and the others didn't know the details of the Fallen River Saint sect. But even so, a mere Fallen River Saint sect wasn't enough to make the sacred palace fear them. In front of a quasi-saint sect, there was no doubt that a sacred sect could only bow down to them. The older, the wiser. The Fallen River Saint sect, Saint had already sensed that something was wrong from Xiao Chun and the others. But Wang Luo didn't believe it at all. After such a long time, Wang Luo still couldn't forget the 100-flower fairy. Now that he could finally see the beauty again, Wang Luo couldn't care less about anything else. Therefore, after hearing the Fallen River Saint sect's saint's words, Wang Luo said indifferently, "Is there anyone in the Tianshan continent that the Fallen River Saint sect is afraid of? I must take this woman away today. Say no more." No matter what, Wang Luo was going to take the 100-flower fairy away today. As for Xiao Chun and the others, if they dared to stop him, he would directly kill them. Wang Luo was used to being lawless since he was young and thought that he could look down on anyone with the Fallen River Saint sect support. Little did he know that he had really kicked an iron plate this time. Hearing Wang Luo's words, the faces of the two Fallen River Saint sect saints beside him turned extremely ugly. For some reason, the two saints suddenly had a bad premonition. It was as if Wang Luo's actions would cause unbearable consequences for the Fallen River Saint sect. As expected, not long after Wang Luo's words, Saint Qingju and the other 8 Saint Palace Saint Venerables appeared in the sky. When they saw Saint Qingju and the other Saint Venerables appear, and all 8 of them were wearing the golden robes of the Saint Palace Saint Venerables, they didn't need to think to know that the 8 of them were from the same faction. When they thought of how Xiao Chun and the others were also wearing golden robes, the two Fallen River Saint sect saints' expressions changed drastically. 8 Saint Realm experts were enough to crush Wang Luo and the others, but Wang Luo still spoke recklessly. "What? Do you want to stop me? Do you know who I am? Have you heard of the Fallen River Saint sect?" Wang Luo thought that the Fallen River Saint sect could suppress Xiao Chun and the others, but when he spoke, an indifferent voice sounded from the sky. "Oh, so what about the Fallen River Saint sect? Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 962. Xiao Sheng, who was dressed in a blue robe, appeared on the field with these indifferent words. Unlike the dazzling golden robes worn by saints, such as Xiao Chun and Saint Qingju, Xiao Sheng's attire couldn't be more ordinary. Coupled with the fact that he didn't exude any aura, Xiao Chun looked like a person that no one would take a second look at if he was thrown into a crowd. He gave off the impression that he was an ordinary person. However, the two saints from the Fallen River Saint sect didn't think so. Although Xiao Sheng didn't exude any aura when he appeared, no one would think that Xiao Sheng was an ordinary person without any cultivation base, since he could appear out of thin air without anyone noticing. The two saints from the Fallen River Saint sect frowned as they looked at Xiao Sheng solemnly. After a long while, one of the saints seemed to have realized something, and his expression changed drastically. He looked as though he had seen a ghost, and his back was instantly drenched in sweat. What exactly had he sensed that could make a saint so terrified in an instant? It was as though he had seen a ghost. Sensing the change in this saint, another saint from the Fallen River Saint sect asked in confusion, "What's wrong?" He's a quasi-saint. Facing the saint's question, the saint who was almost scared out of his wits stuttered, "That's right." This saint felt a shred of the aura of a secondary saint from Xiao Sheng. As a saint of the Fallen River Saint sect, although the Fallen River Saint sect was only a saint clan, it had been in existence for so many years. Naturally, the Fallen River Saint sect had come into contact with secondary saint clans. Moreover, there was actually a quasi-sage sect behind the Fallen River Saint sect. It could be considered as the protector of the Fallen River Saint sect. However, the Fallen River Saint sect had to pay a hefty price every year for such a protector. He had once been fortunate enough to see a quasi-saint from a quasi-saint sect from afar. That feeling was exactly the same as facing Xiao Sheng now. Moreover, the The pressure that Xiao Sheng gave him was even more obvious. There was clearly no aura coming from Xiao Sheng, but the saint from the Fallen River Saint sect felt a bone-deep pressure when he faced Xiao Sheng. This pressure made him involuntarily tremble from the bottom of his heart. The two saints from the Fallen River Saint sect were scared out of their wits. It was hard to imagine that a quasi-saint sect would be standing in front of them at this moment. Moreover, it was simply unimaginable that there would be a quasi-saint sect on the small Tianshan continent. At this moment, the two saints simultaneously recalled a piece of news that had come from the Tiana continent some time ago. It was that a new sect had been established by gathering the strength of the entire Tiana continent. However, the Fallen River Saint sect did not take this rumor seriously. After all, a newly established saint sect was not worthy of the Fallen River Saint sect's attention. Who would have thought that this newly established saint sect was not a saint sect, but a quasi-saint sect? Xiao Sheng's appearance made the two saints from the Fallen River Saint sect completely lose their composure. However, Wang Luo still did not realize the situation and still dared to threaten them. What? Do you really want to attack me? Come if you have the guts. If anything happens to me, everyone on the Tianshan continent will be buried with me. The two saints, who were still thinking of using the Fallen River Saint sect to threaten the sacred palace, cursed in their hearts when they heard Wang Luo's words. He was simply an idiot. Even now, Wang Luo still did not realize that the sacred palace in front of him was a quasi-saint sect. It was obvious that a quasi-saint sect would not be afraid of a sacred sect. Wang Luo was only the young sect master of the Fallen River Saint sect. Even if his father, the sect master of the Fallen River Saint sect, personally came, the sacred palace would probably not care about him. They desperately signaled Wang Luo to stop talking. In the end, one of the saints did not even care about Wang Luo's identity and forcibly restrained him, not allowing him to continue speaking. The other saint cupped his hands and bowed to Xiao Sheng, his forehead drenched in cold sweat. My lords, please forgive us. Our young sect master is young and insensible. If he has offended you in any way, I hope that you will be magnanimous. In the future, the Fallen River Saint sect will definitely give you an explanation. A sacred sect, an existence that could easily destroy the Fallen River Saint sect. How could they dare to be presumptuous? Their attitude was very humble, but when Wang Luo saw this, he scolded angrily. What are you doing? As a saint of the Fallen River Saint sect, how can you be so humble? How shameful. Let me go, let me go. Wang Luo felt that the Fallen River Saint sect didn't need to lower their heads to the Saint Palace at all. Hearing his words, the two saints of the Fallen River Saint sect simply wanted to kill Wang Luo directly. He was simply an idiot. Seeing the saint of the Fallen River Saint sect groveling, Xiao Chun and the others, including Saint Qingju, did not say anything. Only Xiao Sheng said indifferently, "Explanation? No need to go through so much trouble. Today, the few of you are here to explain. Since you have come to the Tianshan continent, there is no need to leave. Stay." Xiao Sheng's tone was very calm, but when it stopped in the ears of the two saints of the Fallen River Saint sect, it was like a sudden clap of thunder. It's over, the two of them thought at the same time. Compared to the two saints, Wang Luo was still arrogant as he shouted, "Leave us here? Who do you think you are? I'm standing here today. What do you dare to do to me? Let me tell you, I am the young sect master of the Fallen River Saint sect. If you dare to touch me, the saints of the Fallen River Saint sect will definitely flatten the Tianshan continent." He was still threatening Xiao Sheng rudely. Hearing this, Xiao Sheng did not say anything more. A terrifying aura soared from his body. This aura was far beyond that of saint. It was clearly something that only a quasi-saint could possess. When he sensed the aura, the saint of the Fallen River Saint sect who spoke earlier had a change in expression. He immediately knelt on the ground and begged Xiao Sheng for mercy. "Quasi-sage, we didn't do it on purpose. Please be magnanimous and forgive us." Quasi-saint was the title of a quasi-saint. Only a quasi-saint was worthy of this title. However, in the face of this saint's begging, Xiao Sheng smiled faintly. Then he slowly reached out his right hand. Without any visible movement, he grasped the air. A huge palm formed from spiritual energy appeared out of thin air. Then, without any resistance, it grabbed the saint of the fallen River Saint sect. With a bang, the saint of the River Fall Sacred sect was crushed to death by Xiao Sheng's hand. I said, "Since you're here, stay." Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 963. Following Xiao Sheng's words, the saint from the fallen river Saint sect exploded. His physical body and saint soul were completely obliterated. Wang Luo was stunned when he saw a saint expert being crushed by Xiao Sheng so easily. He no longer cursed angrily and did not dare to struggle in the slightest. By now, no matter how stupid Wang Luo was, he could guess that Xiao Sheng was a quasi-saint supreme venerate. A sect with a quasi-saint supreme venerate was undoubtedly a quasi-saint sect. Wang Luo felt as though he had swallowed a fly and felt extremely uncomfortable. He was indeed courting death. He had actually come to a quasi-saint sect to snatch someone and had even spoken so arrogantly. Wang Luo's heart was like stagnant water. His excitement from seeing 100 Flower Fairy again was completely extinguished as though a bucket of cold water had been poured over his head. Now that things had come to this, it was no longer Wang Luo's own business. After offending a quasi-sage sect, Wang Luo's fate was no longer a big deal. This was because if he was slightly careless, the entire Falling River Sacred sect would probably be destroyed because of his actions. Although the Fallen River Saint sect also had a quasi-saint sect behind it, the relationship between the two sides was only connected through simple benefits. Who could guarantee that the quasi-saint sect behind the Fallen River Saint sect would be willing to fight to the death with the Sacred Palace for the Fallen River Saint sect? It should be known that a war between two quasi-saint sects would definitely shake the world. Moreover, who could be sure of the true strength of the Sacred Palace now? His heart was like stagnant water, but Xiao Sheng clearly did not give Wang Luo a chance to regret. After killing the saint from the Fallen River Saint sect, Xiao Sheng struck again and easily killed Wang Luo. Even though he was a saint from the Fallen River Saint sect and had a saint protecting him, Wang Luo was still unable to retaliate in front of Xiao Sheng. The saint from the Fallen River Saint sect on the side could not do anything at all. Xiao Sheng killed Wang Luo in front of the saint from the Fallen River Saint sect. After that, Xiao Sheng looked at the saint and said, "I have a few questions for you." There were some things that they wanted to get answers from this saint. Under Xiao Sheng's questioning, it did not take much effort for everyone to learn about the situation of the Fallen River Saint sect. To talk about the Falling River Saint sect, one must first talk about the starry sky where the heavenly Chan continent was located. The starry sky was boundless, and even secondary saints didn't know how big this world where the 100 races lived or how big this starry sky was. The heavenly Chun continent was as small as a grain of sand in this starry sky. No one knew much about the starry sky, including Xiao Sheng. After asking the Fallen River Saint sect saint, everyone found out that the starry sky where the heavenly Chun continent was located was called the Northern Star Boundary. The entire North Star realm was vast and boundless. Its surface area could no longer be described as large. It was as if there was no end to it. In this vast and boundless North Star realm, there were a total of over 300 known continents, including almost all the races. On these 300 continents, there were a total of over 100 saint class families under the sect masters. These sect master sects formed the backbone of the North Star realm, but they were not the overlords of the North Star realm. In the North Star realm, the ones who could truly dominate a region were the 6 major secondary saint sections. These 6 major secondary saint sects each occupied a region and controlled the entire North Star realm. Almost all the sect master sects had chosen to attach themselves to one of the secondary saint sections. There was no other way. If one wanted to survive in the North Star realm, one had to choose to attach themselves to one of the secondary saint sections. Otherwise, it would be impossible to survive. Of course, the reason why the Tiana continent and the heavenly Chun continent were not like this was entirely because the heavenly Chun continent was located in a remote place. It was so remote that the 6 major secondary saint sects looked down on it. It was precisely because they looked down on it that none of the 6 major secondary saint sects wanted to waste time in this remote place. Therefore, the 4 continents in the Tiana continent, the heavenly Chun continent, the northern demon continent, and the blood demon continent had never come into contact with the secondary saint sections. The Falling River Saint sect was located in the Great Divinity continent, which was a continent headed by the God clan. On the Great Divinity continent, there was also a quasi-saint sect. However, this quasi-saint sect was established by the God clan and was called the Supreme Deity sect. In fact, in the North Star realm, the human race did not have a good life because none of the 6 major secondary saint sects were founded by the human race. In other words, the human race did not have much say in the North Star realm because there were no secondary saint sects in the human race. The Supreme Saint sect of the divine race, the demonic sky palace of the demon race, the myriad beast valley of the beast race, the night ghost pavilion of the Gui Zoo, the Li Wang sect of the brute race, the 9th heaven of the divine race. There is no human race in these 6 major secondary saint sects at all. However, this was in the past. Now, with the breakthrough of Shao Sheng and the other 3 and the transfer of power from the sacred palace, the human race finally had a secondary saint sect to oversee the North Star realm. Perhaps it was for this reason that the saint of the Falling River Saint sect had told everything to Shao Sheng without hiding anything, because Shao Sheng had killed Wang Luo. Perhaps in the saint's heart, Wang Luo was too insignificant compared to the entire human race. Even though Shao Sheng had killed Wang Luo, he was still a secondary saint and a secondary saint of the human race. Therefore, the saint of the human race could only disrespect the human race's secondary saints because of Wang Luo's death. The human race needed a quasi-sage too much. At the same time, they also needed a quasi-sage sect. This way, the human ancestor would have more say in the North Star boundary. He would no longer be a fish on a chopping block of other races like before. He could also guess what the saint was thinking. At the same time, his respect for Shao Sheng was absolutely from the bottom of his heart. Therefore, after hearing his words, Shao Sheng did not kill him again. He just looked at him and said indifferently, "I'll let you live. Go. You should know how the Falling River Saint sect should choose. If there is a next time, you should know what will happen to the Falling River Saint sect." First of all, there was no deep hatred between the 2 sides. To put it bluntly, it was because Wang Luo had courted death. Now that Wang Luo had been killed, there was no need for Shao Sheng to be so ruthless. Secondly, they were all from the human race. In the North Star boundary, the human race was not the only race that existed. In fact, the human race was not considered a strong race in the North Star boundary. They had always had to act according to the wishes of other races, with strong enemies surrounding them. If the human race still fought among themselves, it would only benefit other races. Therefore, Shao Sheng did not do anything to the Falling River Saint sect. Of course, this was on the premise that the Falling River Saint sect was tactful. If the Falling River Saint sect did not know what was good for them, Shao Sheng would not be polite. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 964. Upon hearing Shao Sheng's words, the saint from the Fallen River Sacred Sect bowed respectfully. "Thank you, Supreme Sovereign." The saint from the Fallen River Sacred Sect didn't have much hatred for Shao Sheng and the Sacred Palace. Compared to Wang Luo's death, the human race needed a quasi-saint sect. Only then could the human race have more say in the North Star boundary. After bowing and leaving, Shao Sheng and the others didn't stop them. They watched as the starship from the Fallen River Sacred Sect rose into the sky and quickly disappeared into the clouds. Shao Sheng and the others also returned to the Sacred Palace. From the saint from the Fallen River Sacred Sect, everyone had a rough idea of the North Star boundary situation. The heavenly Chun continent had always been located in the North Star boundary. Unfortunately, because it was located far away, the heavenly Chun continent had no contact with the other continents in the North Star boundary. On the way back to the dustless sacred hall, although Xiao Chun didn't say anything, Qin Shu and the other two girls already knew from his expression that Xiao Chun was already fascinated by the boundless North Star boundary. What's wrong? Does my husband want to go to the North Star boundary to train? Sitting beside Xiao Chun, Hundred Flower Fairy smiled. Hundred Flower Fairy's words had indeed touched Xiao Chun's heart. After hearing about the North Star boundary, Xiao Chun indeed wanted to go to the North Star boundary to train. If a person didn't even see what the world they lived in was like with their own eyes, wouldn't they have lived in vain? However, now wasn't the time to leave. The sacred palace had just been established. As the leader of the 10 Chosens, Xiao Chun obviously couldn't leave at this time. Only when the sacred palace was truly stabilized could Xiao Chun set his mind at ease. With a look of longing on his face, Xiao Chun didn't deny Hundred Flower Fairy's words. He said indifferently, "The North Star boundary. One day, I will definitely go there." Big brother Xiao Chun, I'm afraid you won't have to go to the North Star boundary to train yourself when the time comes, Gu Lingyao said when she heard Xiao Chun's words. Oh, what does Lingyao mean? Xiao Chun asked. Are you stupid? Big brother Xiao Chun, think about it. Now that the sacred palace has become the only quasi-saint sect in the North Star boundary, the other forces in the North Star boundary will naturally take the initiative to contact the sacred palace, including the other 6 quasi-saint sections. This way, won't brother Xiao Sheng be able to come in contact with the other forces and races in the North Star boundary? Gu Lingyao, Lingyao Z's words. Xiao Chen nodded in agreement when he heard her words. It was indeed as Gu Lingyao had said. The sudden emergence of a quasi-saint sect would naturally cause a sensation in the North Star boundary. It wouldn't be long before many forces would take the initiative to contact the sacred palace. When that time came, the sacred palace would naturally integrate into the North Star boundary. The little girl was right, but it was still too early to talk about this. Let's wait and see. The sacred palace would naturally occupy a place in the North Star boundary once it was established. Xiao Chun temporarily suppressed the idea of going to the North Star boundary to train and continue to stay in the sacred palace. At the same time, half a month later, in the Fallen River Sacred Sect, located on the Taishan continent, the saint who had returned from the heavenly Chun continent finally arrived. The starship had just landed, and without any pause, the saint immediately went to meet the sect master of the Fallen River Sacred Sect, Wang Luo's father, Wang Qifeng. On this trip to the heavenly Chun continent, not only did Wang Luo die, but the human clan finally had a quasi-saint sect. This was such an important matter that the saint naturally had to report to Wang Qifeng as soon as possible. Moreover, it wasn't just him. The other saints of the Fallen River Sacred Sect obviously had the right to know as well. Therefore, when the saint rushed to the main hall of the Fallen River Sacred Sect, he also sent someone to inform the other saints to hurry to the main hall of the Fallen River Sacred Sect. In less than 15 minutes, more than 10 saints had gathered in the main hall of the Fallen River Sacred Sect. The leader was naturally the sect master of the Fallen River Sacred Sect, Wang Qifeng. All the saints looked at the saint who had returned from the heavenly Chun continent. Wang Qifeng was the first to speak. What happened? Why did you gather everyone in the main hall? Gathering all the saints of the Fallen River Sacred Sect together was obviously not a small matter. In response to Wang Qifeng's question, the saint pondered for a moment before answering. Sect Master, this trip to the heavenly Chun continent is indeed a big matter. The young sect master has died. After thinking about it, the saint decided to speak frankly. After all, this matter couldn't be hidden. Although he knew that Wang Qifeng would definitely fly into a rage after hearing about Wang Luo's death, there was nothing he could do. As expected, Wang Qifeng was initially stunned when he heard those words, but he quickly flew into a rage. A terrifying pressure spread out from his body as he looked at the saint expert and shouted coldly, "What did you say? Luo has died? Say it again." For a moment, Wang Qifeng couldn't accept the fact that Wang Luo had been killed and asked angrily, In response to Wang Qifeng's question, the saint took a deep breath and said, "Sect Master, the young sect master has indeed died." After hearing the saint's answer again, a murderous intent gathered in Wang Qifeng's eyes. Forcefully controlling his emotions, Wang Qifeng said in a deep voice, "Speak. What exactly happened?" For a moment, Wang Qifeng really wanted to slap this saint to death. He and another saint had followed Wang Luo to the heavenly Chun continent, but in the end, Wang Luo and that saint had died at the same time, and only he had returned. Wang Qifeng had wanted to kill him for a long time, but this person was a saint of the Fallen River Saint sect after all. His status was not ordinary, so Wang Qifeng could not really kill him in front of so many people. Otherwise, what would the other saints think? Forcefully suppressing the anger in his heart, Wang Qifeng asked the saint to tell the whole story in detail. In response, the saint nodded and then told the story in detail to everyone present. In fact, the saints of the Fallen River Sacred Sect were gathered here, not because of Wang Luo, but because of the sacred palace. That was the most important thing. Therefore, when he talked about the sacred palace, the saint gave a very detailed explanation. After hearing his description, the saints of the Fallen River Sacred Sect were all completely stunned. A secondary saint sect had actually appeared in the remote heavenly Chun continent? How was that possible? Some people didn't believe it, while others were shocked. However, the saint who returned from the heavenly Chun continent didn't seem to be lying. Moreover, the appearance of a quasi-saint sect was such an important matter that no one dared to talk nonsense about it. Therefore, after the initial shock, more than half of the saints chose to believe the saint's words. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 965. As soon as the saint finished speaking, the entire main hall of the Fallen River Sacred Sect fell silent. All the saints, including Wang Qifeng, fell into complete silence. The human race finally had a quasi-sage sect. This was a matter that was enough to cause a huge earthquake in the entire North Star boundary. No one had expected that a quasi-saint sect would appear in the remote heavenly Qin continent, and that Wang Luo had been killed by a quasi-saint from the sacred palace. In the face of a quasi-sage, even the protection of two saints was obviously insufficient. Therefore, after knowing the whole story, none of the saints present blamed this saint for not protecting Wang Luo well. After all, in the face of a quasi-sage, it was already very difficult for a saint to protect himself, let alone protect others. After a moment of silence, one of the saints sitting below, Wang Qifeng, looked at Wang Qifeng. He was the Grand Elder of the Fallen River Sacred Sect, and his status was second only to Wang Qifeng's. Therefore, he was more concerned about Wang Qifeng's decision. Wang Qifeng was well aware of Wang Luo's position in Wang Qifeng's heart. After all, Wang Qifeng only had one son, Wang Luo. Now that his only son had been killed, it would be a lie to say that Wang Qifeng didn't want to take revenge. However, the one who had killed Wang Luo this time was a quasi-sage sect. The River Falls Sacred Sect was an insignificant existence in front of it. If Wang Qifeng were to lead the saints of the Fallen River Holy Sect to avenge Wang Luo, the only path that awaited the Fallen River Holy Sect would be annihilation. Afraid that Wang Qifeng would do something irrational on impulse, the first elder looked at him. After hesitating a few times, he finally opened his mouth and said, "Don't worry. Sect Master, you can't." The first elder wanted to persuade Wang Qifeng to calm down, but before he could finish speaking, Wang Qifeng directly interrupted him. "All right, I know. You don't need to say anything more. I didn't expect that our human race would have a secondary saint sect. This is a good thing for our human race. As such, how can I be someone who doesn't see the big picture? I already know about Luo Er's matter, so don't mention it again." The saints did not want Wang Qifeng to find trouble with the sacred palace. This was not only because of the sacred palace's strength, but also because the human race of the North Star boundary needed the sacred palace too much. It was no exaggeration to say that the sacred palace would soon become the leader of the human race. Wang Qifeng was the first to leave the main hall. From the looks of it, he was still unable to let go of Wang Luo's death. However, this was only human nature. After all, Wang Qifeng was Wang Qifeng's only child. It would be strange if Wang Qifeng wasn't grieving over Wang Luo's death. After Wang Qifeng expressed his stance, the saints did not think too much about it. They discussed whether they should send someone to the heavenly Chan continent to formally pay a visit to the sacred palace. However, while the saints of the Fallen River Holy Sect were thinking about formally paying a visit to the sacred palace, Wang Qifeng, who had left the main hall alone, returned to his residence. He could no longer control the anger in his heart and smashed everything in his room to vent his anger. Now that he was alone, Wang Qifeng no longer looked the same as before. His eyes were bloodshot, like a wild beast ready to devour someone at any moment. Sitting in the messy room, Wang Qifeng muttered coldly, "Sacred palace, divine palace. How dare you kill my Luo? I don't dare to believe that you're a secondary saint sect of the human race. Even the entire human race cannot compare to my Luo." In Wang Qifeng's heart, the entire human race couldn't compare to Wang Luo. As his voice fell, Wang Qifeng took a deep breath, and the anger in his eyes quickly subsided. However, the chill he involuntarily emitted still made people shudder. He absolutely could not let this go. However, if he wanted to deal with the sacred palace, it was impossible to rely on the Fallen River Holy Sect alone. Even if Wang Qifeng was the sect master, the other saints of the Fallen River Holy Sect would obviously not agree to let him deal with the sacred palace. Since he could not use the power of the Fallen River Holy Sect, Wang Qifeng only had one choice left, and that was the Supreme Divine Sect. The Supreme Divine Sect was a secondary saint sect founded by the God race. There were a total of 3 secondary saint great sovereigns in the sect. One of the great sovereigns that Wang Qifeng was familiar with was called Yidun. He believed that the Supreme Divine Sect did not want to see a secondary saint sect appear in the human race. Therefore, Wang Qifeng's first thought was to use the Supreme Divine Sect to destroy the sacred palace and avenge his son. It had to be said that Wang Qifeng's idea was indeed too extreme. He only wanted to avenge his son and had not considered that he, Wang Qifeng, was a member of the human race. Now that he wanted to use a secondary saint sect of the God race to destroy a secondary saint sect of the human race, this was no different from betraying the human race. Wang Qifeng did not hesitate to betray the entire human race for his son. Perhaps it was because of his character that he had raised a son like Wang Luo. No one knew that Wang Qifeng took advantage of the darkness of the night to leave the Fallen River Holy Sect alone and secretly head in the direction of the Supreme Divine Sect. As the ruler of the Great God Continent, the Supreme Divine Sect was located in the center of the Great God Continent. Wang Qifeng finally arrived at the Supreme Divine Sect after one night. Because he had often come to the Supreme Divine Sect in the past, he did not encounter any obstructions. Wang Qifeng smoothly entered the Sky Saint Sect and went all the way to the cave dwelling in the deepest part of the Supreme Divine Sect. This was the cave dwelling of one of the 3 secondary saints of the Sky Saint Sect, Yidun. Wang Qifeng respectfully bowed and said, Wang Qifeng pays his respects to the Supreme Sovereign. Following Wang Qifeng's words, a deep voice came from within the cave. Come in. After receiving permission, Wang Qifeng carefully entered the cave dwelling. The cave dwelling was very large. Wang Qifeng saw Yidun sitting cross-legged on a mountain peak. Like other members of the God race, Yidun had long golden hair, fair skin, and deep blue eyes. He bowed respectfully to Arden. At the same time, Arden slowly opened his eyes and said calmly, Is something the matter? Reporting to the Supreme Sovereign, there is indeed a matter. Speak. A few days ago, our Falling River Saint sect accidentally discovered a quasi-saint sect founded by the human clan in the heavenly Chin continent. We have confirmed that there are quasi-saint great venerables in it, but we don't know the exact number and cultivation realm. Wang Qifeng did not dare to beat around the bush in front of Yidun and directly stated the purpose of his visit. Of course, Wang Qifeng had already thought of these words. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 966. He knew that it was impossible for the Supreme Divine Sect to avenge him. After all, in the Supreme Divine Sect's eyes, Wang Qifeng was worse than a dog. Furthermore, Wang Qifeng wasn't a member of the divine race, but a member of the human race. The Supreme Divine Sect couldn't care less about an outsider. Therefore, Wang Qifeng didn't mention a single word about his son's death. He only told Adin about the emergence of a quasi-sage sect on the Tiantian continent. He believed that the Supreme Divine Sect definitely didn't want to see the rise of the human race. After all, the rise of the human race meant that the original structure of the North Star boundary would be broken and the current benefits would be redistributed. As expected, Adin's interest was piqued when he heard Wang Qifeng's words. He glanced at Wang Qifeng indifferently and said, "How can you be sure that the Sacred Palace is a quasi-sage sect? Can you see through a quasi-sage cultivation?" Wang Qifeng naturally couldn't see through a quasi-sage cultivation. So how could he be sure? Wang Qifeng hurriedly explained when he heard Adon's words. "Great sage, this lowly one naturally can't see through the cultivation base of a quasi-saint. However, a saint of my Falling River Saint sect was killed by him in a single move. I think that only a quasi-saint can kill a saint with a single move." Wang Qifeng recounted the entire incident to Adin. Adin was silent for a moment when he heard Wang Qifeng's words. Then, a mocking look appeared in his eyes. "In that case, as a member of the human race, why are you telling me this? You must know that the human race has been looking forward to the birth of a quasi-sage sect for a long time. As a member of the human race, Wang Qifeng shouldn't have appeared in the Supreme Divine Sect after encountering such a situation. However, he had come and told Adin everything he knew in detail. Wang Qifeng could sense a strong sense of disdain in Arden's words. Thinking about it, a person who betrayed his own race would definitely be looked down upon no matter where he went, including Arden, who was a quasi-saint of the divine race. A sense of humiliation rose in his heart, but Wang Qifeng didn't dare show it on his face. He knelt on the ground and spoke respectfully like a dog wagging its tail. "Great sovereign must be joking. Although this lowly one was born a member of the human race, this is something that cannot be changed. In fact, this lowly one has always been proud of the divine race." Wang Qifeng's shameless words so calmly made Adin laugh loudly. "Ha, good. You have no choice. So, you'd rather give up your identity as a human and become a dog of the divine race." Adin didn't hide the ridicule in his words, but even so, Wang Qifeng still smiled flatteringly. Yes. This lowly one is willing to give up his identity as a human and become a dog of the divine race. From now on, this lowly one is a dog of the great sovereign and the Supreme Divine Sect. I will bite whoever the great sovereign tells me to bite. This time, Wang Qifeng was even more disdainful than those demonic cultivators. Perhaps Wang Qifeng thought that he was doing all this for the sake of avenging his son, but he had obviously neglected the fact that Wang Luo's death wasn't the main reason. It could only be said that Wang Qifeng was born to be such a person who was only fit to be a dog of others. Looking at Wang Qifeng, who was prostrating himself on the ground, Aten smiled and said, "Get lost. I already know what happened." If Wang Qifeng didn't even treat himself as a human, then there was no need for Aten to treat Wang Qifeng as a human either. Wang Qifeng nodded repeatedly and respectfully left Aten's cave residence. After leaving the Supreme Divine Sect, the smile on Wang Qifeng's face instantly disappeared and was replaced by an extremely cold expression. It's all because of the Divine Palace. If it weren't for that, how could I have fallen to such a state? This time, I like to see how the Divine Palace will resist the Supreme Divine Sect. He blamed all the humiliation on the Divine Palace, but didn't realize that this had nothing to do with the Divine Palace. It was all Wang Qifeng's fault. He was born to be a dog. Wang Qifeng had secretly met with Yadun and even told him some embellished stories. As such, the Supreme Divine Sect obviously couldn't stand idly by. Wang Qifeng, on the other hand, only needed to quietly watch from the sidelines as the sacred palace was destroyed. He pretended that nothing had happened and returned to the Fallen River Sacred Sect, continuing to cultivate as usual. At the same time, the Divine Palace on the heavenly Chan continent was incomparably peaceful. On one hand, they continued to expand the sacred region. On the other hand, they were constantly perfecting various aspects of management. At the same time, they naturally didn't neglect their cultivation. With the sacred region as an excellent cultivation environment, all the Sacred Palace disciples, including the deacons and half-saint elders, worked hard to improve their cultivation. The days were peaceful and fulfilling. Like everyone else, Xiaochen also worked hard on his cultivation. Now that he had reached the entry level of the Tao Emperor realm, his cultivation had completely stabilized, and his foundation was even more solid than before. On this day, Xiao Sheng called Xiao Chun to the main hall of the central peak. Xiao Chun bowed when he saw Xiao Sheng sitting alone in the main hall. Then he smiled and said, "Ancestor, why have you called me here?" Xiao Chun appeared very relaxed in front of Xiao Sheng. He didn't feel the slightest pressure of facing a quasi-saint great sovereign. Seeing Xiao Chen smile, Xiao Sheng also smiled and threw a technique relaying jade to Xiao Chun. "What's this?" Xiao Chun asked in confusion as he received the technique relaying jade. "You'll know when you see it for yourself." Xiao Sheng smiled faintly in response to Xiao Chen's question. "See for yourself." Upon hearing that, Xiao Chun didn't hesitate and used the technique relaying jade on the spot. Then, all the information recorded in the technique relaying jade rushed into Xiao Chen's head. This wasn't the first time Xiao Chun used the technique relaying jade. However, he had never seen such a huge amount of information recorded in the technique relaying jade. Even Xiao Chun felt a little dizzy after receiving all the information in the technique relaying jade. It took him a full 15 minutes to receive all the information in the technique relaying jade. He shook his aching head, but soon a glint of excitement flashed in Xiao Chen's eyes. He looked at Xiao Sheng and said in disbelief, "Ancestor, this is..." He didn't expect that the technique relaying jade that Xiao Sheng gave him would actually record a saint-grade martial skill called the 9 Sifting Sword Qi. This was the first time Xiao Chun had come into contact with a saint-grade martial skill. It was no wonder that Xiao Chun was so excited. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 967. During this period of time, Xiao Chun had been constantly staying in the sacred palace. On one hand, he had been consolidating his cultivation, and on the other, he had been cultivating a new martial skill. It was the 6th finger of the 9 heaven sword finger, the fish intestine sword finger. The fish intestine sword finger was a low-grade saint rank martial skill according to its might. After several days of bitter cultivation, Xiao Chun had discovered that it was extremely difficult to cultivate the fish intestine sword finger. There was a huge threshold between the heaven rank and the saint rank. The most obvious one was that saint rank martial skills required the power of laws to be executed. Without comprehending the power of laws, it was impossible to cultivate saint rank martial skills. The fish intestine sword finger was very difficult to cultivate, but its might was absolutely shocking. Now, Xiao Sheng had passed another low-grade saint rank martial skill to Xiao Chun, the 9 Sifting Sword Qi. This had indeed made Xiao Chun feel extremely excited. If he could successfully cultivate these 2 low-grade saint rank martial skills, then Xiao Chen's strength would definitely improve tremendously. When he saw Xiao Chun looking at him with a pleasantly surprised expression, Xiao Sheng scolded jokingly from the main seat. "A mere low-grade saint rank martial skill can make you so happy? Kid, to think that you're a descendant of the 10 great chosens of my sacred palace. Scram and cultivate properly. Don't lose to others, otherwise you'll lose all face as the number 1 chosen. If you have anything you don't understand, you can ask me at any time." Xiao Chun left the hall after a round of joking and scolding. Needless to say, the 9 sifting sword chi that Xiao Shang had given him was really like a pillow delivered to him when he was feeling sleepy. Ever since he had broken through to the Tao Emperor realm, Xiao Chun had started to feel slightly dissatisfied with the might of heaven rank martial skills. This feeling had become more and more obvious with the passage of time. So, Xiao Chun had started to cultivate the fish intestine sword finger. Now, Xiao Sheng had passed on the 9 sifting sword chi to Xiao Chun. In this way, Xiao Chun would have 2 low-grade saint rank martial skills in his possession. This would definitely improve his offensive strength by a huge margin. His offensive methods had improved by another level. Of course, the prerequisite for this was that Xiao Chun had to master the fish intestine sword finger and 9 sifting sword chi. However, Xiao Chun wasn't worried about this. It was only a matter of time. Xiao Chun wanted a saint rank movement martial skill. However, now wasn't the time. The fish intestine sword finger and 9 sifting sword chi in his possession were already enough to give Xiao Chun a headache. Biting off more than one could chew was bad. So, Xiao Chun made a very rational choice. He would first master the fish intestine sword finger and 9 sifting sword chi before asking Xiao Sheng for a saint rank movement martial skill. The current sacred palace didn't have many saint rank martial skills, but it was absolutely not few either. After all, the sacred palace had gathered the strength of 2 continents. According to Xiao Chen's estimation, there should be around 20 saint rank martial skills in the sacred palace. Even if there weren't that many, it wouldn't be far off. In the following days, Xiao Chun began to concentrate on cultivating the 2 saint rank martial skills, the fish intestine sword finger and 9 sifting sword chi. Of course, it wasn't just Xiao Chun. The other chosen, including Qin Shu and the other 2 girls, had also begun to cultivate saint rank martial skills. With the breakthrough in their cultivation, Xiao Chun and the other chosen also reached the point where they could cultivate saint rank martial skills. Given the current wealth of the sacred palace, they naturally wouldn't be stingy. After all, Xiao Chun and the others were the most outstanding group of people in the sacred palace. The sacred palace would naturally nurture this group of people with great efforts. Time passed very quickly as Xiao Chun was completely immersed in the cultivation of the saint rank martial skills. In the blink of an eye, a month had passed. Unfortunately, Xiao Chun still hadn't mastered the fish intestine sword finger and 9 sifting sword chi. He hadn't even reached the entry level. The difficulty of cultivating a saint rank martial skill was indeed too great. It was at least 10 times more difficult than cultivating a heaven rank martial skill. It was no wonder that many of the half-saint elders in the sacred palace didn't know any saint rank martial skills. However, Xiao Chun wasn't discouraged. He continued to cultivate every day. One morning, while Xiao Chun was cultivating the 9 sifting sword chi in his cave dwelling, a golden starship slowly descended outside the heavenly Qin continent. The golden starship was very large. It was at least 1,000 meters long. Its entire body was golden, and the words Supreme Deity Sect were emblazoned on its hull. The arrival of the Supreme Deity Sect starship on the heavenly Qin continent naturally alarmed the sacred palace. Sacred Palace Saint Venerates flew out of the sacred region and headed straight for the Supreme Deity Sect starship. Such a large movement naturally attracted Xiao Chen's attention. After asking around, he learned that the Supreme Deity Sect had arrived. What exactly did the Supreme Deity Sect want to do by suddenly descending on the heavenly Qin continent? Xiao Chen's heart sank slightly. To be honest, he was very curious about this famous quasi-saint sect in the northern star boundary. Therefore, Xiao Chun didn't hesitate and planned to take a look himself. Xiao Chun wasn't the only one with this idea. The other saints and saintesses were the same, including Qin Shu and the other 2 girls. Therefore, when Xiao Chun left the dustless sacred hall with Qin Shu and the other 2 girls, the saints and saintesses from the other sacred halls appeared one after another. In the end, the group of people rushed towards the Supreme Deity Sect's starship together. When Shao Chun and the others arrived in the sky above the Supreme Deity Sect starship, many experts from both the Sacred Palace and the Supreme Deity Sect had already gathered in this space. On the Supreme Deity Sect side, there were a total of 20 saints and 1 quasi-saint. As for the half-saints and Tao emperors below them, there were even more of them. However, compared to the Supreme Deity Sect, the Sacred Palace's side wasn't weak either. They had more saints than the Supreme Deity Sect, a total of 25. The number of half-saints and Tao emperors below them also suppressed the Supreme Deity Sect in terms of numbers. The experts from both sides faced each other in the sky. At the same time, the quasi-saint leading the Supreme Deity Sect's group was Yidun. Standing in front of the Supreme Deity Sect experts, Yidun swept his gaze across the Sacred Palace group and said indifferently, "What? Is this how the Sacred Palace's quasi-saints treat their guests? We've come all the way here, but you're not even willing to show your face?" In truth, Yidun wasn't very interested in the Sacred Palace saints. He only wanted to see if the Sacred Palace really had a quasi-saint and what their cultivation was like. If the Sacred Palace was too weak, Yidun didn't mind directly destroying the Sacred Palace in one fell swoop and not giving a chance to grow. As soon as Yidun finished speaking, 2 figures appeared out of thin air in front of the Sacred Palace group. They were the 2 ancestors, Shao Sheng and Meng Jie. When the 2 quasi-saint great sovereigns appeared, a strange look flashed through Yidun's eyes when he saw Shao Sheng and Meng Jie, 2 quasi-saints. It looks like the Sacred Palace is stronger than I expected. Yidun looked at Shao Sheng and Meng Jie with an indescribable light flickering in his eyes. He was the first to speak with a smile on his face and looked very gentle. "I heard that a quasi-saint sect has appeared in the human race. Today, I've come as a representative of the Supreme Deity Sect to pay a visit. It looks like the rumors aren't baseless. The human race finally has its own quasi-saint sect. Congratulations. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 968. Yidun congratulated him with a warm smile on his face, but everyone present knew that Yidun's words were definitely fake. No one would believe that Yidun had traveled thousands of miles from the Taishan continent to the heavenly Chun continent just to congratulate the founding of the Sacred Palace. To put it bluntly, Yidun's main purpose was to test the strength of the Sacred Palace. Before coming, Yidun had already discussed with the other 2 secondary saints of the Supreme Deity Sect. On this trip to the heavenly Chun continent, if the Sacred Palace was weak, then Yidun would directly destroy them. If the Sacred Palace was strong, then they would wait and see. It was no exaggeration to say that Yidun chose not to attack because Shao Sheng and Meng Jie had appeared at the same time. Otherwise, if only Shao Sheng or Meng Jie had appeared, Yidun would have already attacked. Yidun's cultivation was at the initial stage of the quasi-saint realm, while Shao Sheng and Meng Jie were only at the beginning stage of the quasi-saint realm. Therefore, Yidun could indeed win in a one-on-one battle. Moreover, if he was willing to pay a price, he should be able to seriously injure either Shao Sheng or Meng Jie. Of course, it wouldn't be easy to kill them, but it didn't matter. As long as he could seriously injure them, the Sacred Palace would be destroyed. Unfortunately, Shao Sheng and Meng Jie had appeared at the same time. Facing 2 quasi-saint great sovereigns, Yidun didn't choose to attack. Of course, Yidun didn't know that the Sacred Palace actually had 4 quasi-saint great sovereigns. However, Shao Sheng and the others weren't stupid enough to expose their trump cards. Therefore, in the face of the arrival of the Taishan sect, only Shao Sheng and Meng Jie showed up. As for Randang and Ice Lotus, they hid in the dark and had no intention of showing up for the time being. Shao Sheng smiled at Yidun's congratulations. The Taishan sect, one of the 6 great quasi-saint sects of the North Star boundary, has personally come to congratulate us. Our Sacred Palace must thank you. He didn't expose Yidun's intentions. Given the current situation, the Taishan sect indeed didn't want the Sacred Palace to rise to prominence. They didn't want to see the emergence of a quasi-saint sect in the human race. However, since the Sacred Palace could become a quasi-saint sect, it naturally wouldn't be simple. Therefore, the Supreme Divine Sect didn't want to rashly start a war. Otherwise, if the Sacred Palace's strength exceeded the Supreme Divine Sect's expectations and a war broke out, it would definitely not be a good thing for the Supreme Divine Sect. After all, if the Supreme Deity Sect and the Sacred Palace fought to the bitter end, who would benefit? It was the other 5 quasi-sage sections. It was precisely because of this concern that Yadun had come to investigate the Sacred Palace. Of course, while Yadun was investigating the Sacred Palace, the Sacred Palace could also use this opportunity to understand the strength of the 6 quasi-saint sects in the North Star boundary. To put it bluntly, both sides were testing each other. Before they understood each other's background, both sides would maintain restraint. This was also why Xiao Sheng didn't expose Yadun's intentions. Yadun's smile didn't diminish in the face of Xiao Sheng's reply. Afterwards, Xiao Sheng took the initiative to invite Yadun to the Sacred Palace as a guest. Yadun naturally wouldn't refuse. Anyone could see that the Supreme Divine Sect didn't come with good intentions. But at this very moment, both sides appeared very friendly. In particular, Xiao Sheng and Yadun seemed like a pair of good friends who hadn't seen each other for many years as they headed towards the Sacred Palace together. Along the way, Gu Lingyao curled her lips and said, "What a hypocrite. He clearly doesn't have good intentions, but he still has the face to go to the Sacred Palace. Humph, if you want to fight, then fight." The little girl was clearly very dissatisfied with Yadun's hypocrisy, but Xiao Chun smiled and rubbed Gu Lingyao's head. A war between 2 quasi-saint sects isn't something that can be fought on a whim. Do you think it's an arena match? Putting aside the strength of the quasi-saint sects, just based on their influence alone, the entire North Star boundary will be thrown into chaos if the 2 quasi-saint sects start a war. Don't forget, there are many sacred sects that rely on the quasi-saint sections. When the time comes, these sacred sects will definitely participate in the war. The scope of the war is too wide, so we must be careful. Xiao Chun could understand Yadun and Xiao Sheng's actions. A war between quasi-saint sects wasn't something that could be fought on a whim, because once the quasi-saint sects started a war, countless people would be affected. What's more, the Sacred Palace and the Supreme Saint Sect weren't the only quasi-saint sects in the North Star boundary. Therefore, quasi-saint great sovereigns like Yadun and Xiao Sheng had to weigh the pros and cons before making a decision. This was because their decision would determine the life and death of countless people. Accompanied by Xiao Sheng and Mengjie, Yadun and the people from the Supreme Saint Sect very quickly arrived at the sacred region. Yadun wasn't too surprised by the sacred region. After all, the Supreme Saint Sect also had such a world, so there was nothing to be surprised about. Along the way, Yadun and Xiao Sheng seemed to be casually chatting, but during the conversation, Yadun constantly probed and inquired about the Sacred Palace. Of course, Xiao Chun was also using Yadun to inquire about the Supreme Saint Sect. The 2 sly old foxes probed each other, and the exchange of words along the way was incomparably exciting. Xiao Chun and the others couldn't help but sigh. They were both old foxes. It was true that old foxes were shrewd. Both of them were old monsters who had lived for who knew how many years and had seen all kinds of situations. Therefore, after this round of probing, both of them were a little depressed. There was nothing they could do about it. Whether it was Yadun or Xiao Sheng, they were both slippery old loaches. It was almost impossible to get anything out of them. Therefore, after probing along the way, the 2 of them consciously chose to give up. This kind of low-level method was completely useless against old foxes like the 2 of them. After giving up on the idea of getting any useful information from Xiao Sheng, Yadun took the initiative to change the topic. "Brother Xiao Sheng, your Sacred Palace's scenery is really picturesque. It's much more beautiful than our Supreme Saint Sect." "Haha, Brother Yadun must be joking. What's the use of picturesque scenery? In the end, it still depends on strength. In the future, our Sacred Palace will have to rely on Brother Yadun and the Supreme Saint Sect to look after us. After all, our Sacred Palace is just a small boat and can't compare to a giant ship like the Supreme Saint Sect," Xiao Sheng said with a smile. comparing the sacred palace to a small boat and the Supreme Saint's sect to a giant ship. Yidun knew that Xiao Sheng was just making things up. One had to know that Xiao Sheng had never shown the slightest respect to the Supreme Saint's sect along the way. Therefore, Yidun didn't believe that the sacred palace would need the Supreme Saint's sect's help. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 969. Amidst the hypocritical conversation, the group soon arrived at the central peak of the sacred palace. There were more than 100 Supreme God sect experts who had come with Adon. In order to entertain them, Xiao Sheng immediately ordered the servants to prepare food and wine, saying that he wanted to drink with Adon until they were drunk. The seemingly ordinary conversation was filled with intrigue. The food and wine had already been prepared in a huge garden behind the central peak. Xiao Sheng, Mengjie, and Adon, the three quasi-saint supreme sovereigns, were naturally seated at the main seats. On the two sides below the three of them were the people from the Supreme Divine Sect and the people from the Sacred Palace. As the chosen and saintess of the Sacred Palace, Xiao Chun and the others were naturally qualified to attend. They sat in the 1st to 10th seats below Xiao Sheng, which was a little higher than the other saints. When the food and wine were served, Xiao Sheng raised his glass and downed it with Adon. As the banquet progressed, the atmosphere seemed harmonious, and the Supreme Divine Sect seemed to have really come to congratulate the Sacred Palace. However, halfway through the banquet, Aten suddenly spoke up. The Sacred Palace's 10 chosen and saintesses are indeed impressive. Brother Xiao Sheng, since there's such an opportunity today, why don't you let the Supreme God Sect's chosen and the Sacred Palace's chosen spar? It'll also teach the kids of the Supreme God Sect that there's always someone better. Adon suggested that the Supreme God Sect's chosen and the Sacred Palace's chosen should spar. Adon had brought a Supreme God Sect chosen with him to the heavenly Chun continent, Kusua. There were a total of 8 chosen and saintesses in the Supreme God Sect. Kusua was ranked 3rd and was very powerful. Upon hearing Adon's words, Xiao Sheng looked directly at the handsome young man sitting in the 1st seat below Adon. He had long golden hair, deep blue eyes, fair skin, and a thin figure. This young man was the Supreme God Sect's 2nd chosen, Kusua. Faced with Xiao Sheng's gaze, Kusua's expression didn't change at all. Withdrawing his gaze, Xiao Sheng looked at Yidun and smiled. All right, since Brother Yidun is in such a good mood, how can I be a wet blanket? As he spoke, Xiao Sheng looked at Xiao Chun and the others on his side and asked calmly, how about it? Do any of you have the confidence to ask for advice from Holy Son, Kusua? On one hand, Yidun wanted to suppress the Sacred Palace by proposing a spar between the two chosen. On the other hand, he wanted to observe the strength of the Sacred Palace's chosen. Don't think that this was just a simple exchange of pointers. In fact, it wasn't. You could guess the general strength of every sacred sect, or even every quasi-sacred sect, from the strength of their Holy Son. After all, what did the saint represent? He represented the hope of every sage sect and even every quasi-sage sect. The stronger the saint was, the stronger the sect would be. The two complemented each other. Xiao Sheng had already guessed Yidun's thoughts, but even so, Xiao Sheng didn't refuse. Upon hearing Xiao Sheng's words, Xiao Chun and the others looked at each other. Then, Chunling stood up and said, Patriarch, let me do it. Chunling was the 2nd chosen of the Sacred Palace. Xiao Sheng nodded in satisfaction when Chunling took the initiative to stand up. He had already planned to let Chunling fight. This battle couldn't embarrass the Sacred Palace, but at the same time, they couldn't let Yidun see the Sacred Palace's strength. Therefore, Chunling was the most suitable candidate. He didn't let Xiao Chun fight. After all, Kusua was only the 3rd chosen of the Supreme Sect. It was indeed inappropriate to let Xiao Chun, the 1st chosen of the Sacred Palace, fight. Moreover, Long Qing was from the Dragon Clan. It was best not to expose his identity. As for Chunyu, he clearly had no intention of fighting. Emperor Qin's strength was perhaps slightly weaker than Ku Suo's. Therefore, after much consideration, Chunling was the most suitable candidate. Chunling volunteered. Ku Suo also stood up. The two walked to the center of the garden and stood facing each other. Chunling said indifferently, "The second chosen of the sacred palace." Chunling, hearing this, Ku Suo's expression remained calm as he said, "Second holy son, I hope you don't disappoint me." "I don't think so." Chunling smiled. The battle between the two sacred sects chosen was about to begin. After all, this was the first time the supreme sect and the sacred palace had come into contact. Ku Suo didn't waste any time. As soon as he finished speaking, he made the first move. He pointed a finger and a golden light flashed. It was just a casual attack, but its power was indeed extraordinary. Seeing this, Chunling also pointed out with his finger, and a large blue light shot out from his finger. The two rays of light collided in the air. After an intense collision, they canceled each other out. In the first exchange, both parties were equally matched. Soon after, Ku Suo took a step forward, and his figure flashed as he charged towards Chunling at lightning speed. Chunling's strength was not bad to be able to block his first attack. Ku Suo no longer held back and raised his speed to the limit. He immediately engaged in an intense battle with Chunling. Their speed was extremely fast. The two figures shuttled through the field like ghosts. Sonic booms constantly rang out. Such an intense battle caused the crowd to be unable to take their eyes off it. It was no exaggeration to say that the battle strength displayed by Chunling and Ku Suo was enough to fight against a half-step saint expert. If the two were compared to the chosen of the sacred sects, the difference was indeed not small. If a sacred sect's chosen were to fight against them, they would probably be defeated in less than 100 moves. As chosen of the sacred sects, the sacred sects chosen of the sacred sects could not be compared to the sacred sects chosen of the sacred sections. Although both sides were called chosen of the sacred sects, the difference between them was not to be underestimated. One had to know that the cultivation conditions of the sacred sects chosen of the sacred sects were much better than the sacred sects chosen of the sacred sections. Under the premise of such a huge difference in cultivation conditions, the sacred sects chosen of the sacred sects were naturally much stronger than the sacred sects chosen of the sacred sections. Chunling and Ku Suo's attack speed was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, the two had exchanged hundreds of moves. It could be said that every punch hit the flesh. Up until now, the two of them had not fallen into a disadvantageous position. They were still evenly matched. At the same time, Xiaosheng and Yadun, who were on the high seats, had their own thoughts. Especially Yadun. His eyes were fixed on Chunling and Ku Suo, who were in the midst of an intense battle. His eyes flashed with an inexplicable light. No one knew what he was thinking. From the current situation, the difference in strength between Ku Suo and Chunling was not that great. It would not be easy for the two of them to determine the winner. Please add, please vote, recommend. Chapter 970. An indescribable light flickered in his eyes. No one knew what he was thinking. Only Adon himself knew that there was a touch of bitterness and seriousness in his heart. He had thought that the sacred palace was just a newly established quasi-saint sect. Even if it had a quasi-saint great sovereign overseeing it, there would still be a gap in overall strength between it and an established quasi-saint sect like the Supreme God sect. However, what Adon didn't expect was that the sacred palace wasn't as weak as he had imagined. Apart from the two quasi-saint great sovereigns, Xiaosheng and Mengjie, the sacred palace chosen were also extremely strong. Based on the sacred palace chosen's battle strength, Adon could easily guess that the other disciples of the sacred palace wouldn't be too weak either. At least, they wouldn't be as weak as he had imagined. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that the sacred palace was fully qualified to contend with an established quasi-saint sect like the Supreme God sect. Looking at the fierce battle between Chunling and Ku Suo was the third chosen of the Supreme God sect, but he couldn't gain the slightest advantage over Chunling. Even with Adon's eyesight, it was difficult to tell who would win in the end. However, even if there was a victor, it would definitely be a Pyrrhic victory. There was even a possibility that both sides would suffer heavy losses. After personally witnessing the Sacred Palace, Adon had to admit that the Sacred Palace was indeed not to be underestimated. Based on the strength that the Sacred Palace had displayed so far, Adon had to treat them with caution. The Sacred Palace was no longer the new quasi-saint sect that Adon had guessed could be destroyed with a wave of his hand. In the face of such a sacred palace, Aten was not strong enough. If the Supreme Divine Sect really wanted to attack the Sacred Palace, the Heavenly Saint Sect would have no problem winning in the end. However, it was undeniable that the Supreme Divine Sect would have to pay a painful price. Was it really worth it to pay such a painful price for the sake of the Sacred Palace? This was a question that Adon had to consider. Of course, Yadun believed that the Supreme Divine Sect would definitely win because he had only considered the strength that the Sacred Palace had displayed so far. If Yadun had known that the Sacred Palace had more than 2 quasi-saint supreme venerates, he probably wouldn't have thought so. But even so, Yadun had completely given up on the idea of attacking the Sacred Palace. He had no choice. The Sacred Palace's appearance had changed the situation in the North Star boundary. As a wise old man, how could Yadun allow the Supreme Divine Sect to take the lead? One had to know that if the Supreme Deity Sect and the Sacred Palace really fought to the death and both sides suffered heavy losses, the other 5 quasi-saint sects would be the happiest. This was the situation that Aten was most unwilling to see. As for Wang Qifeng and the Fallen River Sacred Sect, how could Yadun not know that Wang Qifeng was trying to sow discord? Although he didn't know the reason, Yadun knew right from the start that Wang Qifeng had come looking for him and told him about the Sacred Palace in order to get the Supreme Divine Sect to deal with the Sacred Palace. Unfortunately, the Sacred Palace's strength had exceeded Arden's expectations, so he gave up on the idea. He wasn't going to attack the Sacred Palace anymore. After all, there wasn't any conflict of interest between the two sides, and it wouldn't do him any good to act rashly. Looking at Chunling and Ku Suo, who were still locked in a stalemate, Yadun could tell that the two of them had already gone all out. Every blow that landed was terrifyingly powerful. Watching the two of them fiercely fighting, Yadun suddenly said, "All right, it's just a spar. Both of you can stop." After stopping Chunling and Ku Suo's battle, Ku Suo was the first to stop and took the initiative to retreat. Seeing this, Chunling didn't continue to tangle with Ku Suo and also chose to stop. He didn't let the two of them continue fighting because Yadun knew that there was no point in continuing. The two of them were close in strength, and it would be very difficult to determine the victor. As the battle stopped, Yadun turned to look at Xiao Sheng and smiled. "Aha!" As expected of an outstanding disciple from a famous sect. The Chosen of the Sacred Palace has really opened my eyes. The Chosen of the Supreme Deity Sect isn't bad either. Hearing this, Xiao Sheng smiled. The two of them looked at each other and smiled. Soon after, the crowd resumed their rescue. For some reason, Yadun didn't continue to probe the Sacred Palace, and instead drank and chatted merrily with Xiao Sheng. It felt as if he was really there to congratulate the Sacred Palace. Yadun and Xiao Sheng chatted happily throughout the banquet. In the end, Yadun took the initiative to bid farewell and invited Xiao Sheng to visit the Supreme Divine Sect as a guest. "Brother Xiao Sheng, all good things must come to an end. The two of us drank to our heart's content this time. If you have time in the future, feel free to come to the Supreme Divine Sect. I will personally welcome you, Brother Xiao Sheng." Yadun smiled. Xiao Sheng smiled at Yadun's words. "It's rare for Brother Yadun to come here. How can you not stay for a few more days?" He wanted Yadun to stay on the heavenly Chan continent for a few more days, but Yadun shook his head with a smile. "No, thank you for your kindness, Brother Xiao Sheng. There will be plenty of time in the future." Since Yadun insisted on leaving, Xiao Sheng naturally wouldn't force him to stay. The two old foxes tried to outwit each other. In the end, when Yadun led his people onto the Supreme Divine Sect starship, he suddenly turned to look at Xiao Sheng and smiled. "Brother Xiao Sheng, we hit it off at first sight. There are some things I don't want to hide from you. In fact, The Supreme Divine Sect was only able to learn about the Sacred Palace so quickly because of the Fallen River Holy Sect Master, Wang Qifeng. He came to see me. All right, Brother Xiao Sheng, farewell. Without waiting for Xiao Qin's reply, Yadun immediately boarded the starship and left with a group of powerhouses from the Supreme Deity Sect. Watching the Supreme Divine Sect's starship soar into the sky, Xiao Sheng stood in the sky with a faint smile on his face. How could Xiao Sheng not understand Yadun's intentions? It was a classic attempt to sow discord and have the Sacred Palace attack the Fallen River Holy Sect. Although Yadun had already given up on attacking the Sacred Palace, he was still very happy to cause some trouble for the Sacred Palace. Moreover, Wang Qifeng and the Fallen River Holy Sect were both from the human race. If the Sacred Palace attacked the Fallen River Holy Sect, the Supreme Divine Sect wouldn't suffer any losses. They were naturally happy to see that happen. Xiao Sheng didn't doubt the truth of Yadun's words. He believed that Wang Qifeng had really gone to see Yadun. Moreover, Xiao Sheng had already guessed what Wang Qifeng had said to Yadun. Otherwise, how could the Supreme Divine Sect have learned about the Sacred Palace so quickly? A cold light flashed in Xiao Sheng's eyes. He muttered softly, then turned around and returned to the Sacred Palace. It seems that the Fallen River Holy Sect won't give up until they see the coffin. But that's fine too. It'll give the Sacred Palace an excuse. Xiao Sheng returned to the central peak of the Sacred Palace. In the main hall of the central peak, he summoned Dipankara and Bing Lian. The four patriarchs sat together in a circle. Clearly, they had something to discuss. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 971. Xiao Sheng and the others sat in a circle in the Great Hall and looked at Randang and the others. Xiao Sheng said indifferently, "It seems that the Supreme Divine Sect has already set their sights on us. However, the Falling River Sacred Sect doesn't know what's good for them. I want to make an example out of them." Yadun's words before he left were clearly to sow discord between the Sacred Palace and the Falling River Sacred Sect. He wanted the Sacred Palace to attack the Falling River Sacred Sect. However, Xiao Sheng didn't care about this. The most important thing was that the Sacred Palace was basically on the right track. As a newly established quasi-saint sect, the Sacred Palace would inevitably have to deal with the other 6 quasi-saint sects of the North Star boundary. In other words, with the establishment of the Sacred Palace, it would sooner or later integrate into the North Star boundary. As a result, the Sacred Palace had just been established and didn't have much of a reputation. At this moment, the Sacred Palace urgently needed to establish its prestige and let the other sects and forces of the North Star boundary know that the Sacred Palace wasn't to be trifled with. At the same time, it also told the other sects and forces of the North Star boundary that the rise of the Sacred Palace was inevitable. It was clear that many people didn't want to see the rise of the Sacred Palace. After all, the emergence of a new quasi-saint sect meant that it would destroy the interests that had been previously divided. As a result, instead of tolerating everything, the Sacred Palace might as well kill to establish its prestige. The Falling River Sacred Sect was the best target at the moment. They had bumped into the muzzle of the spear. Knowing Xiao Sheng's thoughts, Randang, Bing Lian, and Meng Jia pondered for a moment before speaking. It's not impossible to attack the Falling River Sacred Sect, but Xiao Sheng, the Falling River Sacred Sect, is still a human force. If we directly destroy them, I'm afraid the other human forces will be dissatisfied. The Sacred Palace was a quasi-saint sect established by the human race, and the Falling River Sacred Sect was also a human force. If the Sacred Palace attacked the Falling River Sacred Sect, it would be tantamount to killing one of their own. It wouldn't be good if word of this spread. Knowing what Randang was worried about, Xiao Sheng smiled and said, "Who said that we were going to destroy the Fallen River Holy Sect? We were just cleaning up the black sheep inside the Fallen River Holy Sect." Xiao Sheng had never thought of destroying the Fallen River Saint Sect. His target this time was only the sect lord of the Fallen River Saint Sect, Wang Qifeng. Killing him and supporting another elder to become the sect lord of the Fallen River Saint Sect was Xiaoshang's real goal. At the same time, Xiaoshang wanted to use this opportunity to bring the sacred palace into the sights of the other quasi-sage sects in the North Star boundary and pave the way for the rise of the sacred palace in the future. They didn't need to destroy the falling River Saint sect. They only needed to deal with Wang Qifeng. Randang didn't say anything after hearing Xiaoshang's words. After some discussion, the four quickly decided that Xiaoshang and Mengjie would lead people to the Taishan continent. As for Randang and Bing Lian, they would continue to guard the sacred palace. It wasn't time for Randang and Bing Lian to expose themselves yet. It was always good for the sacred palace to hide some tricks. The four patriarchs made their decision. On the other side, Xiao Chun, who was in the dustless sacred hall, returned to his cave residence with Qin Shuru and the other two women. However, before they could sit down, a saint from the sacred palace came and told Xiao Chun to lead 500 disciples and elders of the Wuchen sacred palace to prepare to leave for the Taishan continent tomorrow. This time, Xiao Shang planned to bring Xiao Chen's Wuchen sacred palace, Chen Ling's Lingyun sacred palace, and Chongqing's Thousand Dragon sacred palace along with them. A total of 1,500 experts from the three holy temples, including Xiao Chun and the other two holy sons, as well as Xiaoshang and Mengjie, were deployed. Such a force was enough to easily suppress the fallen river holy sect. Xiao Chun was slightly taken aback when he heard the saint's words, but then he nodded and agreed. Xiao Chun hadn't expected that Xiaoshang would lead people to the Taishan continent. However, since he had already made his decision, Xiao Chun naturally couldn't say anything. Moreover, Xiao Chun was looking forward to going to the Taishan continent. He had seen the saint of the Taishan sect with his own eyes. He was indeed very strong and could fight evenly with Chunling. Xiao Chun also wanted to fight the saint of the Taishan sect. The news that Xiaoshang and Mengjie were going to lead people to the Taishan continent quickly spread. Xiao Chun and the other saints from the three sacred palaces would follow them. For a moment, Hu Fei, Emperor Qing, and the other saints were envious. They hadn't received any orders from the saints. In other words, they couldn't go to the Taishan continent and could only stay in the sacred palace. They had long wanted to go out and see the prosperity of the North Star boundary, but unfortunately, they didn't have the chance this time. Early the next morning, Xiao Chun, Chunling, and Chongqing each led 500 experts from the sacred palace to the central peak. Then, Xiaoshang and Mengjie also appeared. Everyone boarded the starship and left the sacred palace, heading towards the Taishan continent. During the establishment of the sacred palace, Xiaoshang and the other saints had built a few more starships. The starship that Xiao Chun and the others were on was a newly built one. It was silver-white in color and nearly 1,000 meters long. It was huge, and the words Sacred Palace were engraved on the ship's hull, indicating that the starship belonged to the Sacred Palace. Xiao Chun, Long Qing, Chunling, and Qin Shuru were sitting together in the starship's hull. Xiao Chun had already told Xiao Chun and the others the purpose of this trip. Xiao Chun and the others didn't care too much about it. A mere fallen river sacred sect wasn't worth their attention. Xiao Chun and the others were really looking forward to the Taishan sect. They didn't know if they would have the chance to fight the chosen of the Taishan sect on this trip to the Taishan continent. After taking a sip of wine, Xiao Chun looked at Chunling and smiled. "Big brother, how is Ku Sua's strength? Are you really not confident in defeating him?" Only Chunling had fought with the chosen of the Taishan sect before. As they chatted, Xiao Chun asked curiously. In response to Xiao Chen's question, Chunling smiled and said, "He's very strong. I'm afraid it would be difficult to determine the victor between us in a simple exchange of pointers. However, if it was a life-and-death battle, the victor should be 50-50. He wasn't exaggerating. Ku Sua was indeed very strong. Even if it was a life-and-death battle, Chunling and Ku Sua would have a 50-50 chance of winning. Chunling didn't have absolute confidence in defeating him. Hearing this, Xiao Chen's anticipation grew. The chosen of the quasi-saint sects were indeed not to be underestimated. Each of them was boundlessly strong. However, it was precisely because of this that it was more interesting. He was looking forward to this trip to the Taishan continent. If he could personally exchange pointers with the chosen of the Taishan sect, then this trip would really be worth it. Seeing the faint fighting spirit in Xiao Chen's eyes, Chun Ling smiled and said, "It seems that this trip to the Taishan continent will be very exciting. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 972. Xiao Chun and the others did not know much about the Taishan continent. Or rather, they knew very little about the entire North Star boundary. Because of this, Xiao Chun was looking forward to the trip to the Taishan continent. In the starry sky, the sacred palace starship quickly cut through the starry sky and headed straight for the Taishan continent. They did not encounter any trouble along the way. Half a month later, they arrived at the Taishan continent. Standing on the deck of the starship, they looked at the magnificent continent in front of them. This was the Taishan continent, the continent controlled by the Taishan sect. Now that they had truly witnessed the vastness of the Taishan continent, the Tianqian continent was almost like a small island compared to it. Even the Tiana continent was far smaller in size. It was at least 10 times the size of the Tiana continent. What Xiao Chun and the others did not know was that there were several races living on the Taishan continent. Not only were there humans in Shun clan, but there were also Demon clan, Beast clan, and Ghost clan living on the Taishan continent. However, because of the existence of the Taishan sect, the Shun clan was the undisputed master of the Taishan continent. The other races had to submit to them. This was the first time they had left the Tianqian continent and come into contact with a continent in the outside world. The Taishan continent was about to become the first stop of the Sacred Palace's rise. He had directly ordered the starship to land, so he didn't know the exact location of the Fallen River Holy Sect. However, this was obviously not a problem. He could ask anyone to find out. After all, the Fallen River Holy Sect was a saint sect. He believed that they would not be unknown on the Taishan continent. No one knew where they landed. The Sacred Palace starship landed directly in a mountain range on the Taishan continent. This mountain range was huge. At least, Xiao Chun and the others had never seen it before. The mountain ranges of the Tianqian continent and the Tiana continent could not compare at all. There was no one around. Then, Xiao Shang said to everyone, "Go and find out about the Taishan continent." They did not know anything about the Taishan continent, so Xiao Shang asked everyone to go and find out. In this regard, Xiao Chun and the others naturally volunteered. Then, Xiao Chun, Chun Ling, Long Qing, Qin Shu, and a saint from the Sacred Palace went to the outside world to find out more information. As for the others, they stayed on the starship and waited for Xiao Chun and the others. The fact that Xiao Chun and the others were allowed to go out was something that the others were naturally envious of. However, there was nothing they could do about it. Xiao Shang had already given the order, and no one dared to disobey. They left the starship together with a saint to protect them. Coupled with the strength of Xiao Chun and the others, there was no need to worry too much about their safety. After all, there were only a handful of quasi-saint great sovereigns on the Taishan continent. There were only Yadun and the other two from the Taishan sect. Therefore, Xiao Chun and the others had enough strength to protect themselves. Moreover, for convenience, Xiao Chun and the others had changed out of their Sacred Palace attire. Everyone was only wearing casual clothes. This way, no one knew the identities of Xiao Chun and the others. They planned to find a city first. After all, it was more convenient to go to the city to find out more information. However, Xiao Chun and the others had underestimated the size of this mountain range. It took them 2 days to rush out of the mountain range. They finally arrived at the periphery of the mountain range. Just as the group was about to look for a city, Xiao Chun and the others ran into a group of Taishan continent cultivators who seemed to have entered the mountain range to train. The two groups met. This group was composed of Taishan continent cultivators. There were a total of 18 people, but they were all injured and all of them were from the human race. All of them were injured, and 2 of them were seriously injured. Xiao Chan didn't say anything, but Gu Lingyao couldn't bear to see them like this, so she gave them some healing pills. They were all from the human race. Since they had run into each other, Xiao Chan didn't say much about it. Gu Lingyao wasn't stingy at all. She gave them 18 high-grade heaven-level pills. The human race group looked at each other when they saw this. Then a middle-aged man who seemed to be their leader stepped forward and bowed to Xiao Chun and the others. "Thank you, everyone, but you should leave as soon as possible. We're being pursued by the ghost race. They are very strong and have a half-sane expert. Everyone should leave this place as soon as possible." He didn't reject Gu Lingyao's elixirs. After all, the human race team needed these elixirs too much, especially the two severely injured people. If they didn't sign up for the elixirs soon, they would probably die. The middle-aged man thanked Xiao Chun and the others sincerely and reminded them to leave this place as soon as possible. After some conversation, Xiao Chun found out. This group of people came from a nearby city called Fire Phoenix City. They were all from the same family, and the middle-aged man leading them was called Li Qi. He was once the head of the Leaf family in Fire Phoenix City. However, half a month ago, the Leaf family was attacked by another large family in Fire Phoenix City. The head of the family was from the ghost race, and his name was Wu Yunfeng. The entire Fire Phoenix City was dominated by the Leaf family and the Wu family. However, one of them was from the human race, while the other was from the ghost race. In addition, there was a lot of competition for interests. Therefore, the two families had a deep grudge since a long time ago. This time, the Wu family had prepared for a long time. They made strict arrangements and attacked the Leaf family when they least expected it. Soon, they defeated the Leaf family. Many of the Leaf family's clansmen and consecrators were killed by the Wu family experts. In the end, only Li Qi led the dozen or so Leaf family direct descendants to escape. Although they escaped Fire Phoenix City, Li Qi and the others were intercepted by the Wu family several times along the way. As a member of the Wu family, they obviously would not let Li Qi, the head of the Leaf family, and the Leaf family direct descendants beside him off so easily. After knowing the ins and outs of the matter, Li Qi did not hide anything from Xiao Chun. After all, Gu Lingyao had given away more than 10 heaven-grade upper-rank elixirs in one go. This made Li Qi secretly guess that Xiao Chun and the others had an extraordinary identity. In addition, the Leaf family was indebted to them. Therefore, Li Qi straightforwardly told Xiao Chun the whole story. As soon as he finished speaking, Li Qi looked at Xiao Chun and said seriously, little brother, I can't thank you enough for your kindness. However, you should leave quickly. The Wu family is not weak. Especially this time, they have invited 3 ghost race experts from some unknown place. All of them are half-step saints. If you meet them, you will be in trouble. He urged Xiao Chun and the others to leave as soon as possible and not meet the Wu family experts. Otherwise, Xiao Chun and the others would be in danger. Chapter 973. Li Qi constantly urged Xiao Chun to leave quickly. After a conversation, Xiao Chun felt that Li Qi wasn't a bad person. At the very least, he was a person who knew how to be grateful. Under such circumstances, Li Qi was still worried about the safety of Xiao Chun and the others. He didn't want to drag Xiao Chun and the others into the battle between the Wu and Li clans and implicate them. However, Li Qi clearly didn't know that a mere Wu clan was nothing in the eyes of Xiao Chun and the others. The strongest experts they had were merely 3 half-sane experts. Such a force was simply too weak to withstand a single blow from them. As he looked at Li Qi, Xiao Chun noticed with a single glance that Li Qi's cultivation was at the perfection of the Tao Emperor realm. In this way, the Wu clan's patriarch, Wu Yunfeng, should only be at the Tao Emperor realm. Otherwise, the Li clan wouldn't have been able to fight the Wu clan for so many years without being defeated. Xiao Chun really didn't need to care about a mere clan that only had a Tao Emperor realm expert. Even if Wu Yunfeng had somehow managed to invite 3 half-sane experts from the Ghost Clan, it would still be the same. Xiao Chun had no intention of leaving. He had a good impression of Li Qi. Moreover, Xiao Chun and the others still needed to find a city to gather information. It just so happened that according to Li Qi, the closest city to here was Fire Phoenix City. So, Xiao Chun didn't intend to leave. It would be even better if he encountered the Wu clan and helped Li Qi along the way. He'd already decided to head directly to Fire Phoenix City. Li Qi was slightly anxious when he saw that Xiao Chun had no intention of leaving. However, before he could speak, a young man behind Li Qi shouted angrily with scarlet-red eyes. "Father, how long are we going to run for? The Wu clan has slaughtered so many of us. Father, let's go back and fight them to the death." The young man looked to be only 15 or 16 years old. His cultivation was merely at the Earth Mirror realm. Perhaps it was because of the effects of the healing medicinal pill from before, but the young man's injuries had improved greatly. At this moment, he shouted at Li Qi with an unwilling expression. This young man was called Li Chengfeng. He was Li Qi's third son and also the youngest son. This time, because of the sudden attack by the Wus, Li Qi's other two sons had already died. Only Li Chengfeng, the youngest son, had escaped with him. In the face of Li Chengfeng's angry roar, Li Qi was just as unwilling. However, he wasn't a brat like Li Chengfeng. Li Qi was clearly more far-sighted. Perhaps from Li Chengfeng's point of view, if Li Qi was willing to gather the previous consecrators of the Li family, in addition to these years of connections, they could indeed gather a group of experts to contend with the Wu family. However, even if they could contend with the Wu family, so what? The Li family was destined to lose this battle because the three half-saints invited by the Wu family were elders from the Heavenly Ghost sect. Behind the Heavenly Ghost sect stood the Night Ghost Pavilion, one of the 6 quasi-saint sects of the North Star Field. Because Li Qi knew this, he did not intend to fight to the death with the Wu family from the beginning. As for the reason, it was very simple. If they fought to the death, the Li family would be destroyed in the end. Think about it. Even if Li Qi had the ability to destroy the Wu family, so what? There was still the Heavenly Ghost sect. Moreover, even if the human clan also had saint-level sects, the Heavenly Ghost sect had the Night Ghost Pavilion behind them. What could the human clan use to fight against the Night Ghost Pavilion? Because of this, Li Qi chose to flee, only to leave behind some descendants of the Li family. However, Li Chengfeng, who was still young and frivolous, clearly did not understand this. In Li Chengfeng's opinion, Li Qi's actions this time were too cowardly. Li Qi sighed lightly and said indifferently, "Chengfeng, there are some things that you are still young and do not understand. You will understand in the future." Li Qi did not berate Li Chengfeng. He could understand his feelings now. However, after hearing these words, Li Chengfeng did not bite at all and continued to shout angrily, "No, I will never move. Father, you obviously have the ability to contend with the Wu family. Why did you bring us to escape? Could it be that father is just going to watch mother, big brother, and the second brother get killed and do nothing? Don't you want to avenge the people of the Li family?" Li Chengfeng continued to roar furiously. His words had clearly touched Li Qi's heart. Upon hearing these words, Li Qi's emotions were somewhat agitated as he shouted back, "Impudent! How dare you speak to me like this? Fine, if you want revenge, then go ahead. Yes, I can contend with the Wu family, but so what? Do you know that the 3 saint-level experts that the Wu family invited this time are from the Heavenly Ghost sect? Do you think that the Li family can contend with the Heavenly Ghost sect?" The Heavenly Ghost sect was a saint-level sect. For a family like the Li family, it was obviously impossible to contend with it. After being shouted at by Li Qi, Li Chengfeng's imposing manner weakened a lot. However, with his stubborn personality, he clearly did not want to give up. He lowered his head and said unwillingly, But even so, the Wu family has the Heavenly Ghost sect. Don't we also have the Fallen River Saint sect? Can't the Fallen River Saint sect fight against the Heavenly Ghost sect?" The Fallen River Saint sect? Hearing Li Chengfeng's words, a strange look flashed across Xiao Chen's eyes. However, he did not open his mouth to interrupt the argument between the father and son. He thought that he would ask later. Moreover, listening to the argument between Li Chengfeng and Li Qi, Xiao Chen felt somewhat uncomfortable. Li Qi's meaning was very clear. In the North Star boundary, the human race showed weakness. Therefore, many things could only be done in silence. For example, this time, Li Qi clearly had the ability to contend with the Wu family, but he did not do so. This was because he clearly knew that the human race was no match for the ghost race. As expected, after Li Changfeng mentioned the Fallen River Saint sect, Li Qi snorted coldly and said, so what if the Fallen River Saint sect is there? Let's not talk about whether the Fallen River Saint sect will go against the Heavenly Ghost sect for the Li family. Even if the Fallen River Saint sect is willing to help, what about the Night Ghost Pavilion? Don't tell me you don't know what the Night Ghost Pavilion is. The Fallen River Saint sect could indeed go against the Heavenly Ghost sect, but who would go against the Night Ghost Pavilion? Hearing this, Li Changfeng was completely speechless. Yes, the human race did not have a quasi-sage sect. Without a quasi-sage sect, it meant that the human race had no backing. It was also because of this reason that the human race's status on the Taishan continent was very low. Compared to the ghost race and the beast race, it was much lower, let alone the god race. On the supreme divine continent, the sects of the ghost race and the beast race didn't need to rely on the supreme divine sect. Moreover, the supreme divine sect would often give them some face when dealing with them. The reason was very simple. The ghost race and the beast race both had quasi-sage sects that could make the supreme divine sect somewhat apprehensive. However, the human race was different. On the Taishan continent, the human race's sects and forces had to rely on the supreme sect. Otherwise, they would definitely be destroyed. Moreover, because they were not of the same race, the supreme sect was obviously not so polite to the human race's sects and forces. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 974. On the Taishan continent, the human clan was often at a disadvantage. The reason was very simple. It was because the human clan did not have the backing of a quasi-saint sect. Therefore, even the human clan saint sects could only lower their heads on the Taishan continent and become watchdogs under the Taishan sect. It was precisely because the human race didn't have a quasi-sage sect and because they were weak that they were bullied. Previously, they had heard about the human race's status in the North Star boundary. But today, they truly experienced the helplessness of the human race in the North Star boundary. Just like the matter between the Li and Wu families, Li Qi clearly didn't need to run away like this. Li Qi clearly had the ability to fight against the Wu family. But because the Night Ghost Pavilion was a quasi-sage sect, Li Qi, who clearly could have chosen to resist, chose to compromise. This was because Li Qi was very clear that for the human race, there were many things that they could only swallow in silence and turn big problems into small ones. Once the matter blew up and escalated to the level of a quasi-sage sect, then the human race would have no right to speak. At that time, they could only be trampled on. Li Qi's words made him speechless. Yes, so what if he was unwilling? The human race didn't have a quasi-sage sect, so there was no room for resistance. Even if his teeth were knocked out, he could only swallow his anger. Li Changfeng, who was only 15 or 16 years old, had his head lowered. His eyes were red, but he stubbornly held back his tears. It could be said that the current Li Changfeng was a child who didn't know the ways of the world. However, such an innocent child had shaken Xiao Chun and the others. An indescribable feeling flowed in the hearts of Xiao Chun and the others. This was a child of the human race. He was proud of being born a human. Therefore, in the face of the human race's weakness, Li Changfeng didn't complain. He also didn't feel that being born a human was shameful. Li Changfeng was only unwilling. Lowering his head and holding back his tears, Li Changfeng still wanted to say something, but he stuttered and couldn't say anything. But perhaps Li Changfeng still wanted to refute Li Qi, but he couldn't find a reason. Just as Li Changfeng stuttered and wanted to refute, a big hand directly pressed on Li Changfeng's head and gently patted him on the head. Looking up, Li Changfeng saw that Xiao Chun had appeared beside him at some point. At this moment, Xiao Chun had one hand on Li Changfeng's head, a faint smile on his face. Kid, you're right. Although the human race is still very weak right now, It's precisely because of the existence of humans like you that I believe that the human race will definitely rise up in the North Star realm one day, and it won't be too far away. They were moved by Li Chengfeng's performance. People of Li Chengfeng's age were the future hope of a human race. If everyone could be like Li Chengfeng, why would the human race not rise? Moreover, it wasn't that the human race didn't have any quasi-sage sects now. The sacred palace had already appeared, and the quasi-sage sects of the human race had already appeared. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Li Chengfeng stood there in a daze. At this moment, more than 10 terrifying auras came from behind the group. Sensing these auras, Li Qi's expression changed, and he couldn't help but look at Xiao Chun. "Brother Xiao, the Wu clan's people are coming. Hurry up and leave." He wanted Xiao Chun and the others to leave as soon as possible, but in response, Xiao Chun smiled and said, "It's fine. It's just the Wu clan. We can destroy it with a wave of our hand." As he spoke, Xiao Chun looked at Li Chengfeng, who was an entire head shorter than him, and said softly, "If you look carefully, the human race isn't as weak as you think." As soon as he finished speaking, Xiao Chun didn't wait for Li Chengfeng's reply. He directly strode over to the group from the Li clan. At the same time, Chun Ling, Long Qing, Qin Shu, and Saint Mu Tian did the same. All of them stood in front of the group from the Li clan. After they stood in front of the group from the Li clan and protected the group from Xiao Chun and the others, numerous thin and ghastly pale ghost clan cultivators appeared in front of them. Surprisingly, the 3 half-saints from the heavenly ghost sect that Li Qi had mentioned were in the lead, and there were more than a dozen cultivators from the Wu clan behind them. 3 half-saints and over a dozen Dao emperors and Dao kings. Li Qi's face couldn't help but sink when faced with such a lineup. On the other hand, Xiao Chun and the others remained calm, as if they didn't take the group of Ghost Clan experts before them seriously at all. "Who are you? What's your relationship with the Li clan?" One of the half-saints from the Ghost Clan asked when he saw Xiao Chun and the others. However, before Xiao Chun and the others could reply, another half-saint from the Ghost Clan laughed coldly and said, "Who cares who they are? They're all humans anyway, so we'll just kill them all." These half-saints from the Ghost Clan were used to being arrogant on Taishan continent, especially when they faced the human race. They always felt that the human race was inferior to their Ghost Clan. So, these 3 half-saints from the Ghost Clan didn't intentionally sense the cultivation of Xiao Chun and the others at all. They completely disregarded Xiao Chun and the others. It was as if the human race was fish on the chopping board in their eyes, and they could kill them at any time. Li Qi, who stood behind Xiao Chun and the others, quickly stepped forward when he heard that. A wisp of determination flashed through his eyes as he spoke to the 3 half-saints from the Ghost Clan. "They're not from a Li clan and have nothing to do with the Li clan. Let them go." Even now, Li Qi didn't want Xiao Chun and the others to be hurt. However, the 3 half-saints from the Ghost Clan clearly disagreed and sneered. "I don't care if they're from the Li clan or not. They're humans anyway. Since we've bumped into them, they can only blame their bad luck. You've gone too far. Don't forget that the human clan also has a saint sect in Yunfeng Mansion. Aren't you afraid of the human clan's saint sect?" Li Qi gnashed his teeth in anger when he heard the 3 half-saints from the Ghost Clan sneering at him. The Taishan continent was huge, and the place where Xiao Chun and the others were at was called the Yun Peak Mansion. The heavenly ghost sect of the Ghost Clan was not the only saint sect in the Yun Peak Mansion. The human clan also had a saint sect in the Yun Peak Mansion. However, the 3 half-saints from the Ghost Clan laughed even more brazenly when they heard Li Qi's words. "Haha, the human clan's saint sect? Are you talking about the Fallen River saint sect? To tell you the truth, the heavenly ghost sect isn't afraid of the Fallen River saint sect. We've only killed a few humans. Would the Fallen River saint sect dare to say anything? If the Fallen River saint sect really had the guts, they would have attacked the heavenly ghost sect long ago. Why would they wait until today? Cut the crap. Today is the anniversary of your death. Don't use the Fallen River saint sect to threaten us. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 975. Hearing the words of the three Ghost Clan half-saints, Xiao Chen knew that they had landed in the Yun Peak Mansion. Furthermore, the Fallen River Saint sect happened to be in the Yun Peak Mansion. It was really a stroke of luck. He did not expect to land directly in the Yun Peak Mansion where the Fallen River Saint sect was located. This saved him a lot of trouble. However, now is not the time to talk about the Yun Peak Mansion. He had to deal with the Ghost Clan first. Then, he would make a trip to the Fire Phoenix City and deal with the Wu family as well. Xiao Chun was indeed filled with killing intent towards the insolence of the Ghost Clan. Was the human clan really so weak? That was impossible. Moreover, the human race did not have a quasi-sage sect. This was already a thing of the past. From now on, with the rise of the sacred palace in the human race, the status of the entire human race would also undergo earth-shaking changes. Xiao Chen patted Li Qi's shoulder gently. Seeing that Li Qi still wanted to say something, Xiao Chun stopped him. Xiao Chun felt that it was useless to say anything more to the Ghost Clan. Moreover, there was no need to argue with the dead. After stopping Li Qi, Xiao Chen looked at the group of Ghost Clan warriors in front of him and revealed a cold smile. Actually, the human clan is really not that weak. At least, it is not so weak that you can do whatever you want. Haha, is this human clan boy stupid? The human clan is not weak? If the human clan is not weak, then why does your Fallen River Saint sect never stand up for the human clan? What a joke. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, the three half-saints of the Ghost Clan laughed out loud again. Because the human clan was weak, the Fallen River Saint sect could also be said to be extremely cowardly. In the Yun Peak Mansion, the Fallen River Saint sect had never stood up for the human clan. It was precisely because of the Fallen River Saint sect's cowardice that the Heavenly Ghost sect in the Yun Peak Mansion became more and more unscrupulous. Anyway, no matter what the human clan did, the Fallen River Saint sect would not dare to stand up. This was a human clan without any backbone. The smile on Xiao Chen's face didn't fade when he faced the ridicule of these three Ghost Clan half-saints. The Fallen River Saint sect is a disgrace to the human race. But we aren't members of the Fallen River Saint sect. Senior Mutian, let's attack. It's a waste of breath to speak with these pieces of trash. Falling River Holy Sect was indeed a disgrace to the human race. Xiao Chun and the others would deal with them later, but right now, they had to deal with these ghost race cultivators first. He looked at Saint Mutian and said softly. Hearing this, Saint Mutian nodded slightly. Then, a terrifying aura instantly soared from his body. The three half-saints of the Ghost Clan who had been laughing wildly felt the terrifying aura coming from Saint Mutian's body. The three of them were instantly silenced. They were like three ducks whose necks had been grabbed. Their wild laughter came to an abrupt end. They looked at Saint Mutian with jealousy and horror. Saint Mutian didn't deliberately expose his aura, and the three half-saints of the Ghost Clan didn't take the initiative to sense his cultivation base. They didn't know Saint Mutian's exact cultivation base, but now, as Saint Mutian's aura soared into the sky, the three half-saints of the Ghost Clan knew that this human before them was definitely a genuine Saint Realm Venerable. They didn't expect a human clan saint to be hiding among Xiao Chen's group. In an instant, the three half-saints of the Ghost Clan were horrified. Not only the Ghost Clan, but even Li Qi and the rest of the Li family behind them were dumbfounded. They wanted Xiao Chen's group to leave quickly, but who knew that there was a saint among Xiao Chen's group? You're from the Fallen River Saint sect? The three half-saints of the Ghost Clan asked in astonishment. There was only one saint sect in the Yun Peak Mansion, and that was the Fallen River Saint sect. Besides, the human clan saints in the Yun Peak Mansion were basically from the Fallen River Saint sect. When they saw that Saint Mu Tian's cultivation base was in the Saint Realm, the three half-saints of the Ghost Clan naturally assumed that Xiao Chen's group was from the Fallen River Saint sect. However, Xiao Chen said indifferently, I said that we're not from the Fallen River Saint sect. They were not from the Fallen River Saint sect. Hearing this, the three half-saints from the Ghost Clan forced themselves to calm down. Then, they shouted proudly, I don't care which saint sect you're from, but let me tell you this. The three of us are elders of the Heavenly Ghost sect. If you dare to lay a hand on us, the Heavenly Ghost sect won't let you off. The three half-saints of the Ghost clan weren't stupid enough to attack a human clan saint, but they didn't believe that Saint Mu-Tian would dare to do anything to them. The human clan had been weak in the Yun Peak mansion for many years. So what if he was a human clan saint? Would he dare to attack? They thought that with the Heavenly Ghost sect backing them up, Xiao Chun and the others wouldn't dare to make a move. However, it had to be said that these ghosts were wrong this time. A mere Heavenly Ghost sect was nothing in front of the Sacred Palace. Xiao Chun sneered and said indifferently, "The Heavenly Ghost sect isn't qualified. Perhaps we can negotiate if the Night Ghost Pavilion of the Ghost Clan comes. But your Heavenly Ghost sect is too weak." With that, Saint Mu-Tian made a move. He clenched his fist across the air and crushed one of the half-saints of the Ghost Clan. The remaining two half-saints of the Ghost Clan were shocked when they saw that Saint Mu-Tian had killed one of them without hesitation. They didn't dare to stay any longer and turned to leave. This was crazy. How could a human clan saint kill a member of the Ghost Clan? Moreover, he was an elder of the Heavenly Ghost sect. Weren't they afraid of the Heavenly Ghost sect's revenge? They couldn't figure it out, but they didn't have time to think about it. They immediately turned around and fled. However, Saint Mu-Tian didn't intend to give them a way out. He took a step forward and chased after them. Saint Mu-Tian went after the two half-saints of the Ghost Clan. At the same time, the remaining Wu clan members were all stunned. The situation had changed too quickly. They didn't even have time to react. After Saint Mu-Tian left, Xiao Chun looked at the group of ghosts from the Wu clan and said nonchalantly, "Let me deal with these people." With that, Xiao Chun walked toward the Wu clan members alone. As for Chen Ling, Long Qing, and Qin Shiru, they had no intention of helping. Seeing Xiao Chun walk toward the Wu clan members alone, Li Qi, who was still in shock, asked almost subconsciously, aren't you going to help little brother? Facing so many Wu clan members, wouldn't it be too dangerous for Xiao Chun to go alone?" Hearing Li Qi's words, Flower Fairy smiled and said, "Don't worry. These weaklings aren't worthy of being my husband's opponent. Moreover, the human clan isn't as weak as you think. Begging for your collection, begging for votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 976. On Taishan Continent and in Cloud Peak Mansion, the human clan was used as swallowing their anger. It couldn't be helped. The human clan had always been at a disadvantage when facing the other clans, especially the Ghost Clan and God Clan. This was especially true for the human race martialists who were born and raised in Yunfo Mansion. They seemed to have been instilled with the idea that the human race was inferior to the deity race and the ghost race since they were born. So, the human clan would habitually choose to back down whenever they encountered something. Just like Li Qi, he was a typical member of the human clan in Cloud Peak Mansion. However, Xiao Chun wouldn't talk about that. Regardless of whether it was the Ghost Clan or the God Clan, there was nothing to fear. Not to mention that these Ghost Clan cultivators before him were merely elders of the Heavenly Ghost sect, and they were simply not worth mentioning in Xiao Chen's eyes. Facing over 10 Ghost Clan cultivators by himself, Xiao Chun pointed out with his finger, and a ray of light shot out explosively. He directly executed the pure finger sword. These Ghost Clan cultivators were simply too weak in Xiao Chen's eyes, and they were so weak that Xiao Chun was utterly unable to arouse any interest in them. Even the strongest amongst them was only at the Dao Emperor realm. However, even though his cultivation was the same as Xiao Chun, it was utterly impossible for him to be a match for Xiao Chun in terms of combat strength. The gap between the two of them was too great. With 3 successive swipes of his finger, 3 members of the Wu clan's Ghost Clansmen had been killed by Xiao Chun. The expression of the Wu clan's leader, who was at the Dao Emperor realm, changed slightly when he saw this. After the battle, he was naturally able to sense that Xiao Chen's cultivation had similarly attained the Dao Emperor realm. However, the strength Xiao Chen revealed caused the leader's heart to shake violently. They were both at the Dao Emperor realm, but Xiao Chen's strength was formidable to the point it shook the hearts of others. coupled with Xiao Qin's age. The Wu clan leader seemed to have guessed something. There was only one explanation for possessing a cultivation at the Dao Emperor realm and possessing such terrifying combat strength at Xiao Qin's age, and it was that Xiao Qin was the holy son of a hallowed sect. Only a holy son could attain the Dao Emperor realm at such a young age and possess such formidable combat strength. The Wu family leader's guess was correct, but not accurate. Xiao Qin was indeed the holy son, but not the holy son of the Glory sect. Instead, he was the holy son of the Second Sage sect. Compared to the holy son of the Glory sect, Xiao Qin's strength was obviously stronger. So, in a short period of less than 100 breaths of time, Xiao Qin had dealt with all these bastards from the Wu clan, and only the leader of the Wu clan who was at the Dao Emperor realm remained. Seeing his own clansmen being mercilessly slaughtered by Xiao Qin in less than 100 breaths, the Wu's leader panicked when he saw Xiao Qin walking towards him slowly. The Wu's leader unconsciously stepped back. As he stepped back, he shouted in horror, If you dare to kill me, the Heavenly Ghost sect won't let you off. Even the Fallen River Holy Sect won't be able to protect you." Facing Xiao Qin, the Wu's leader couldn't summon any fighting spirit at all, so he could only threaten Xiao Qin with words. However, the threat of the leader of the Wu family was obviously of no use to Xiao Qin. Heavenly Ghost Sect? What a joke. Not to mention the Heavenly Ghost Sect, Xiao Qin wouldn't be afraid even if the Second Sage Great Venerables of the Ghost Clan or the Night Ghost Pavilion personally came. Therefore, the threat of the leader of the Wu family did not have any effect at all. Xiao Qin continued to approach the leader of the Wu family as he spoke faintly while walking. "I don't need the protection of the Fallen River Holy Sect, and I'm not afraid of the Heavenly Ghost Sect. So, you better not say such stupid words. It's useless." As he spoke, Xiao Qin didn't do anything special. He just pointed his finger and displayed the shadow-bearing sword finger, an upper heaven-level martial technique. A dark sword light shot towards the Wu's leader fiercely. It was so fast that the Wu's leader didn't have time to react. He only felt a hot sensation between his eyebrows, and a finger-sized bloody hole appeared. The Wu's leader looked at Xiao Qin in disbelief after the finger pierced through his forehead. Finally, the Wu's leader fell to the ground and died unwillingly. It didn't take more than 300 breaths from Xiao Qin's attack to the Wu's leader's death. While Xiao Qin was dealing with the Wu's bastards, Saint Mu Tian, who went to chase the two half-saints from the Ghost Clan, also returned. Needless to say, since Saint Mu Tian had appeared here, the fate of the two half-saints from the Ghost Clan could be imagined. In front of a saint, two half-saints couldn't escape at all. Of course, unless they were holy sons like Xiao Qin. Unfortunately, they weren't. Li Qi and the rest of the Li family were stunned when they saw the Ghost Clan's warriors being slaughtered like chickens and dogs. Their mouths were wide open enough to swallow an egg. However, amidst everyone's exclamations, there was one person who revealed a look of excitement. It was Li Qi's son, Li Chengfeng. Li Chengfeng had previously expressed his extreme unwillingness. Now, when he saw Xiao Qin and Saint Mu Tian kill the Ghost Clan's warriors so easily, Li Chengfeng felt his blood boil. A sense of excitement that he had never felt before filled his heart. Ignoring the shock of the Li family, Xiao Qin came to Li Qi's side and called out a few times before Li Qi came back to his senses. Xiao Qin smiled when he saw this. "Patriarchally, if there's nothing else, take us to Fire Phoenix City. There's no need to worry about the Wus and the Heavenly Ghost Sect." They were lucky enough to encounter Xiao Qin's group. Li Qi and the rest didn't need to flee because there was no need to. Upon hearing Xiao Qin's words, Li Qi steeled his heart. After all, Li Qi was similarly unwilling to flee Fire Phoenix City in such a wretched manner. He wanted to flee the place where the Li family had lived for more than 100 years. Similarly, he didn't want to flee. Now that he had encountered Xiao Qin and company, Li Qi secretly made up his mind. At worst, he would die. Having made his decision, Li Qi looked at Xiao Qin and said with a smile. At that moment, Li Qi was clearly no longer as casual as before. Be it his tone or expression, there was a deep sense of respect. This was especially so when he faced Saint Mutian. Brother Xiao, I can't thank you enough. Let's go. I'll lead the way. Not knowing what to say, Li Qi took the initiative to lead Xiao Chun and company towards Fire Phoenix City. The mountain range wasn't far from Fire Phoenix City to begin with. With Li Qi leading the way, Xiao Chun and company soon arrived at Fire Phoenix City. It wasn't considered a large city. Therefore, Xiao Chun and company did not pay much attention to Fire Phoenix City. Instead, it was Li Qi and the Li family that returned. Facing the familiar Fire Phoenix City once again, the Li family's mental state underwent a great change. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 977. Li Qi and company returned to Fire Phoenix City. As one of the large family clans in Fire Phoenix City, Li Qi was naturally a reputable person in Fire Phoenix City. Furthermore, everyone in Fire Phoenix City already knew about the Wu family surprise attack on the Li family half a month ago. Now, seeing Li Qi, who had fled, return on his own accord, everyone began to discuss it. Walking on the streets of Fire Phoenix City, the surrounding people were pointing at Li Qi and the Li family members and gossiping about them. Regarding this, the Li family members wore heavy expressions. As for Xiao Chun and company, they wore indifferent expressions, as though they did not hear the discussions around them. Xiao Chun sized up Fire Phoenix City with interest. In terms of scale, Fire Phoenix City was nothing much. Over the years, Xiao Chun had seen many bustling cities and towns. Therefore, he was not surprised to see a city like Fire Phoenix City. The only thing that interested Xiao Chun was the residents of Fire Phoenix City. Along the way, Xiao Chun discovered that there were many races in Fire Phoenix City. There were humans, beasts, ghosts, and even celestials. Different races lived in the same city. This was something new for Xiao Chun and company. After all, be it the Heavenly Chun continent or the Heavenly River continent, they were all human continents. Apart from some beasts, there were no other races. It was unlike the Great God continent, where people from all major races gathered. To Xiao Chun and company, the Great God continent, or even Fire Phoenix City, was like a microcosm of the North Star domain. It was a microcosm of many races living together. However, after some curious observation, Xiao Chun acutely realized that humans did not have a high standing in Fire Phoenix City. Although there was once a large clan like the Li family, the true rulers of Fire Phoenix City were the Celestials. This was because the city lord manor of Fire Phoenix City was managed by the Celestials. Apart from them, there was the ghost race. The humans were only third. He had already clearly told Li Qi to return to the Li family and not to worry about anything else. Li Qi, who had made his decision, didn't say anything else. He directly led Xiao Chun and the others to the former Li family mansion. They arrived at the center of Fire Phoenix City. After passing through 2 junctions, a large red door to a courtyard appeared at the end of the road. This was where the Li family's mansion was located. However, it had now become the property of the Wu family. Furthermore, the Wu family had sent some people to guard it. From afar, they could see 2 ghost clan guards guarding the entrance of the courtyard. Seeing this, Xiao Chun nodded slightly at Chunling. Then, Chunling took a step forward and appeared in front of the courtyard. Facing the sudden appearance of Chunling, the 2 guards from the Wu family and ghost clan were stunned. Who was this human who suddenly appeared? However, facing the shock of the 2 ghost clan guards, Chunling did not waste any time and immediately attacked. Furthermore, he did not show any mercy. With a palm strike, he killed the 2 ghost clan guards on the spot. To Chunling, there was no need to keep these ghost clan guards alive. Killing them was nothing. After all, in the Taishan continent, one's fist was all that mattered. There was no need to care about anything else. After killing the 2 ghost clan guards, Chunling took the lead and walked into the courtyard. Very quickly, from within the Li family mansion, there was a wave of spiritual energy in the aftermath of the battle. However, the aftermath of the battle came and went quickly. In less than 100 breaths, it had disappeared. The disappearance of the aftermath of the battle meant that Chun-Ling had killed all the ghost clan guards in the Li family mansion. The Wu family was not strong to begin with. It was impossible for them to send any experts to guard the Li family mansion. Therefore, the Li family mansion was easily taken back by Xiao Chun and the rest. Li Qi and the rest of the Li family walked into the mansion. In the front yard, they saw the corpses of the 4 ghost clan guards. Regarding this, a strange look flashed across Li Qi's eyes. However, he did not say anything in the end. He respectfully invited Xiao Chun and the rest to the main hall of the Li family mansion. Then, Li Qi got the others to clean up the corpses in the courtyard. In the main hall, there was only Xiao Chun and the rest, as well as Li Qi. They did not dare to sit on their usual main seats. Li Qi consciously sat beside Xiao Chun and said respectfully, "Brother Xiao, I think the Wu family will come knocking on our door very soon." Xiao Chun said with a smile. It was obvious that the matter of him and the rest of the Li family returning to Fire Phoenix City was not enough to satisfy Wu Yunfeng. "It's fine. If they don't come, I'll go look for them. Patriarchally, you don't have to worry about these matters. First, summon the servants of your Li family. We still have companions coming, so we'll have to trouble patriarchally with our accommodations." Li Qi did not have to worry about the Wu family and the Heavenly Ghost sect. After all, he could not help much. The only thing Li Qi could do was take care of everyone's lives. Previously, he had casually looked around the Li family mansion. It occupied a large area and was enough for everyone from the sacred palace to stay. Therefore, Xiao Qun planned to send a message to Xiao Sheng, asking him and Prime Saint Mengjie to bring the rest to Fire Phoenix City. They would first stay here before heading to the Falling River Sacred Sect. After all, it was not far away and was within the Yunfeng mansion. Li Qi naturally did not say anything about this. On the contrary, he was very happy and immediately nodded in agreement. With Xiao Chun and the rest around, Li Qi felt a lot more at ease. Therefore, he did not waste any time and quickly went to summon the servants of the Li family. He also began to clean the courtyard and prepare rooms for Xiao Chun and the rest. He told Li Qi that it was best to prepare more accommodations since there were hundreds of them. Hearing this, Li Qi immediately cleaned all the courtyards in the Li family mansion. Given the size of the Li family mansion, it would not be a problem to accommodate hundreds of people from the Sacred Palace. Li Qi's main concern now was how to take care of everyone from the Sacred Palace. He had long regarded Xiao Chun and the rest as his last hope. After Xiao Chun and the rest settled down in the Li family mansion, the Wu family mansion was located in another large mansion not far from the Li family mansion. Unlike the Li's mansion, the Wu's mansion was painted with black paint. At first glance, it gave off a gloomy feeling. Of course, this was also because the living habits of the Ghost Clan were different from that of the Human Clan. Therefore, the style of the building was naturally different. At this moment, in the hall of the Wu family, a middle-aged man was sitting on the main seat. Below him, a Wu family Ghost Clan member was respectfully saying something to the man. After a while, the middle-aged man said coldly, "Don't worry. Li Qi and the rest are back. Are they courting death? Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 978. This middle-aged man was the Wu family head, Wu Yunfeng. He was also Li Qi's mortal enemy. The two of them had been fighting since they were young. Later on, when they each became the family head of the Li family and the Wu family respectively, the fight had never stopped. Originally, Wu Yunfeng had invited experts from the Heavenly Ghost sect to attack the Li family in one fell swoop. Although Li Qi and some of the Li family's direct descendants had escaped, to be honest, Wu Yunfeng did not care too much about Li Qi, who was now like a stray dog. Furthermore, Wu Yunfeng had sent people to kill Li Qi. It was hard to say if he could survive. Originally, he thought that the matter was settled. However, Li Qi's sudden return made Wu Yunfeng suspicious. He could not understand where Li Qi got the courage and reason to return to Fire Phoenix City. Was he really here to die? He was very curious about Li Qi's actions. Furthermore, Wu Yunfeng was also suspicious about another matter. Were the people he sent to kill Li Qi? Did they not find Li Qi? Or was it that Li Qi? He had been pursued by the Wu family. Logically speaking, Li Qi should not have had the chance to return to Fire Phoenix City. However, he was back now. Wu Yunfeng guessed in his heart. However, he soon laughed at himself. This was absolutely impossible. The people he had sent to kill Li Qi were not only the people from the Wu family, but also the 3 half-saint elders from the Heavenly Ghost sect. As such, it was impossible for Li Qi to win. Li Qi must have escaped their pursuit and returned to Fire Phoenix City. For a moment, Wu Yunfeng suspected that something bad had happened to Li Qi during the pursuit. However, he quickly dispelled this suspicion. With Li Qi's strength, it was impossible for him to pose a threat to the troops he had sent out to pursue Li Qi. Just as Wu Yunfeng was secretly guessing, another Wu family ghost clan member hurriedly ran in. He bowed to Wu Yunfeng and hurriedly said, "Family head, bad news. Li Qi and the rest have returned to the Li family mansion. The people we sent to guard the Li family mansion have all been killed." Li Qi had returned to the Li family mansion? He even killed people from the Wu family? Wu Yunfeng's face darkened when he heard this news. A soaring killing intent spread out from his body as he spoke viciously. "Li Qi, you are really courting death. Not only did you dare to appear in Fire Phoenix City, you even killed members of my Wu family. Very well. You chose not to take the heavenly Tao when there was a path, but instead chose to barge into the gates of hell. Let's see if you can escape this time." He did not expect Li Qi to be so daring. Seeing Wu Yunfeng's killing intent, the Wu family ghost clan member hesitated for a moment before continuing. "Patriarch, also, according to our intelligence, Li Qi seems to have some unfamiliar human warriors by his side. We don't know their identities." Xiao Chun and company had entered Fire Phoenix City with Li Qi, so the Wu family naturally knew of them. However, although they knew of the existence of Xiao Chun and company, the Wu family did not manage to find out the identities of Xiao Chun and company. Hearing that there was an unfamiliar human race warrior following beside Li Qi, Wu Yunfeng was stunned at first, but soon he laughed coldly. "An unfamiliar human martial artist? Heh, Li Qi, are these the helpers you found? Do you really think that you can change anything with just a few human race cultivators? This time, your Li family will definitely be annihilated because I have the Heavenly Ghost sect behind me. How can the few human martial artists you found be a match for me?" He thought that Xiao Chun and company were helpers invited by Li Qi. However, Wu Yunfeng did not care about this. All along, Li Qi had thought that Wu Yunfeng had only invited 3 half-saint elders from the Heavenly Ghost sect. However, this was not the case. The 3 half-saint elders were indeed invited by Wu Yunfeng, but this was not his trump card. In order to deal with the Li family, Wu Yunfeng still had a trump card that he had not used. And this trump card was the true source of Wu Yunfeng's confidence. At the same time, in Wu Yunfeng's opinion, with this trump card, the Wu family had the hope of rising. A merely family was not worth mentioning. Send someone to contact the hunting team and have them return to Fire Phoenix City immediately. In addition, send someone to closely monitor Li Qi's every move. When the 3 half-saint elders return, we will kill the Li family in one fell swoop and eradicate the remnants of the Li family, Wu Yunfeng said after pondering for a moment. Until now, Wu Yunfeng still thought that the hunting team led by the 3 half-saint elders from the Heavenly Ghost sect had not found Li Qi's whereabouts. Little did he know that the team had long been wiped out by Xiao Chun. Inform the hunting team. Hearing this, the Wu family ghost clan member responded respectfully. However, he soon discovered that the hunting team could not be contacted at all. He had used several message-transmitting talismans, but no one had replied. After trying for more than 10 breaths to no avail, the Wu family ghost clan member sensed that something was wrong and quickly reported the matter to Wu Yunfeng. It was already evening and the sky was gradually darkening. Hearing that the hunting team could not be contacted, Wu Yunfeng's face finally revealed a trace of seriousness. There was no reason for them to be uncontactable, unless they had already. The previous thoughts surfaced again, but Wu Yunfeng did not dare to believe such a result. It should be known that the hunting team was led by 3 half-saint elders from the Heavenly Ghost sect. How could Li Qi have the ability to deal with them? It was impossible. Li Qi simply did not have the ability to do so. Even when the Li family was at its peak, it was impossible for them to have the ability to deal with 3 half-saint experts. Wu Yunfeng knew this very well. However, since the hunting team had collectively disappeared as if they had evaporated from the face of the earth, the only explanation was that they had been wiped out. The more he thought about it, the more he felt uneasy. In the end, Wu Yunfeng finally thought of a possibility. It was those foreign human warriors who had appeared beside Li Qi. Li Qi did not have the ability to deal with the hunting team, but what about those foreign human warriors beside Li Qi? This was the only explanation. Since these people could deal with a hunting team, their strength must be enough to crush the Wu family. After all, even 3 half-saint experts had disappeared without a trace. This was not a joke. Thinking of this, Wu Yunqi's heart was filled with both surprise and joy. He was surprised because where did Li Qi find these human race cultivators? They actually had the ability to annihilate the troops he had sent out to hunt them down. He was also happy because, fortunately, he had a backup plan. Otherwise, wouldn't the Li family have made a huge comeback? After figuring everything out, Wu Yunfeng also knew that the most important thing to pay attention to now was not Li Qi, but those foreign human warriors beside Li Qi. A trace of extreme, killing intent flashed in his eyes as Wu Yunfeng said coldly, "Li Qi, even if you have the ability to reach the heavens this time, you will not have the chance to make a comeback. Even if you wipe out my hunting team, so what? I don't believe you can wipe out the entire Heavenly Ghost sect." Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 979. The hunting troop and the 3 half-saint elders of the Heavenly Ghost sect could not be contacted. Wu Yunfeng was certain that they were doomed. It was impossible for Li Qi to destroy the hunting troop and the 3 half-saint elders of the Heavenly Ghost sect. Therefore, there was only one explanation. It was done by the foreign human race warriors around Li Qi. The strength of the foreign human race warriors could not be underestimated. After all, they had destroyed the hunting troop and the 3 half-saint experts of the Heavenly Ghost sect. His eyes flashed with a cold light. Fortunately, the Wu family still had someone to rely on. Otherwise, Li Qi might have really turned the tables in this desperate situation. The killing intent in his heart continued to condense. After a moment of silence, Wu Yunfeng said to the Wu family Ghost Clan member in front of him, "You leave first. Remember, keep a close eye on Li Qi's every move. I want to know his news at all times." "Yes, family head, don't worry." Hearing this, the Wu family Ghost Clan member respectfully replied. Then, he turned and walked out of the room. After leaving with the Wu's Ghost Clan member, Wu Yunfeng also stood up and walked toward the backyard. Half a month ago, the backyard of the Wu's had been listed as a forbidden area by Wu Yunfeng. Other than Wu Yunfeng and his only son, Wu Zhe, no one was allowed to enter. At this moment, Wu Yunfeng strode towards the backyard. When he arrived at the backyard, he pushed open the door. The killing intent on his face instantly disappeared and was replaced by a flattering smile. The entire backyard had become a forbidden area. When Wu Yunfeng pushed open the door, he could see that in the pavilion in the courtyard, there was a bed. The bed was covered with red gauze. He could vaguely see that on the bed, there were 4 or 5 young girls and a young Ghost Clan member playing. At the same time, beside the bed, there was a young Ghost Clan member who looked somewhat similar to Wu Yunfeng. He stood with his hands behind his back and looked very respectful. The young ghost standing by the bed was indeed Wu Yunfeng's only son, Wu Zhe. The young ghost dancing on the bed was Wu Yunfeng's trump card. Actually, it wasn't accurate to call it a trump card. It should be said that the reason why the Wu family was able to successfully destroy the Li family was because of the young Ghost Clan. The 3 half-saint elders of the Heavenly Ghost sect were also called over by the young Ghost Clan. It was also because of him that the three half-saint elders of the Heavenly Ghost sect chose to help the Wu family. This young man from the Ghost clan was called Nam Mu, and he was a holy son of the Heavenly Ghost sect. Coincidentally, Wu Zhe was also a disciple of the Heavenly Ghost sect. It took a lot of effort for Wu Zhe to catch the eye of Nam Mu. In addition, Wu Zhe knew how to cater to Nam Mu's interests, so he quickly gained Nam Mu's appreciation. It was also because of Nam Mu, the holy son of the Heavenly Ghost sect, that the Wu family was able to obtain the support of the Heavenly Ghost sect so smoothly and destroy the Li family. Wu Yunfeng walked respectfully towards the pavilion in the courtyard. Standing outside the pavilion, Wu Yunfeng could already hear the sounds of pleasure coming from the bed. Nam Mu's talent was needless to say. He naturally had his own ability to become the holy son of the Heavenly Ghost sect. However, he was too lecherous. Wu Yunfeng had already found no less than 100 beauties for him in just half a month's time in the Wu family. These 100 beauties were not only from the Ghost clan, but also from the Divine clan and the Human clan. Nam Mu was almost inseparable from women at all times. However, Wu Yunfeng and Wu Zhe naturally didn't dare to say anything about this. The Wu family had to rely on Nam Mu. Therefore, Wu Yunfeng and Wu Zhe tried their best to satisfy all of Nam Mu's requests. It was also because of this that Nam Mu had a good impression of the Wu family. He didn't dare to casually enter the pavilion. However, Wu Yunfeng only waited for a few breaths before Nam Mu's voice came from the bed. "Family head Wu, you came to find me in the middle of the night. Could it be that something has happened again?" There was a tinge of weariness in his voice. Clearly, Mu's body was not as strong as he wanted to be, as he was crazily immersed in the beauty. This was because he was a warrior and had a cultivation base. Otherwise, if he was an ordinary person, he would have died long ago. Hearing Nam Mu's words, Wu Yunfeng immediately replied respectfully, "Holy Son Nam Mu has something to report to you. It's about the three elders." Hearing that it was about the three elders, the red veil covering the bed was lifted. Then, a pale-faced and skinny young man from the Ghost clan walked down. At the same time, the moment the red veil was lifted, Wu Yunfeng also saw the spring scenery on the bed. It was really beautiful and unparalleled. Ghosts were thin to begin with, but Nam Mu was even more so than other ghosts. It was as if he was only left with a layer of skin and bones. There wasn't even a trace of flesh. Dragging his sickly thin body, Nam Mu sat down in front of the stone table and poured himself a cup of wine. He asked as he drank, "Tell me, what happened?" Then, "Saint, we have suddenly lost contact with the three elders. Furthermore, that Li Qi has returned to Fire Phoenix City. Furthermore, there are some unknown human warriors protecting him. I'm thinking that since Li Qi dares to return to Fire Phoenix City and the three elders suddenly lost contact with him, it is likely that he has already." Wu Yunfeng voiced out his conjecture. Of course, he couldn't help but embellish some details, such as how Li Qi dared to kill the elders of the Heavenly Ghost sect. Wu Yunfeng naturally wouldn't let go of the opportunity to say such things. As long as Nam Mu bore a grudge against Li Qi, the Li family would definitely be finished. Wu Yunfeng told Nam Mu the story that he had long thought of. As expected, after hearing Wu Yunfeng's words, Nam Mu's face turned gloomy. He held the empty cup of wine in his hand as killing intent constantly gathered in his eyes. "You're saying that Li Qi killed the elders of my Heavenly Ghost sect?" Nam Mu asked coldly as he looked at Wu Yunfeng. "Holy Son, please forgive me. This is only my conjecture. However, since we lost contact with the three elders for some unknown reason, and Li Qi just happened to return to Fire Phoenix City at this time, all of this is indeed too much of a coincidence," Wu Yunfeng replied cautiously. No one dared to make a conclusion, as the corpses of the three Heavenly Ghost sect elders had yet to be found. However, after hearing Wu Yunfeng's words, Nam Mu shouted with overflowing killing intent, "A merely family dares to kill the elders of my Heavenly Ghost sect? Good, very good. Patriarch Wu, immediately gather the people of your Wu family. Tomorrow, I will go with you to the Leaf family. This time, this holy son will personally take action. I will definitely slaughter the Leaf family. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.